Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome. Good evening, everyone, to the March 24th meeting of the Burbank Infrastructure Oversight Board. May I have everyone please stand for the flag salute.
Yes.
Hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Ms. Rosales, could we get our roll call, please?
Yes. Armin Avazian?
Yeah.
Walter Brennan Jr.?
Here.
Maria Coronado?
Here.
Greg Jackson?
Here.
Vanessa Rochelle?
Here.
Tamala Takahashi?
Here.
And Jeff Vanderboort?
Also here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody's here tonight. Do we have any announcements? Mr. Berkman, Ms. Rosales? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Happy to announce that our meeting in May will be able to be in person, and we'll have the details coming in our April meeting. So looking forward to actually seeing you. So that's it for me.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Any other announcements?
I'd like to make a comment.
Mr. Berkman?
Mr. Berkman was very kind to arrange a meeting with me and Mr. Sarkeesian and Mr. Pearson with regards to the work that's upcoming on the police department, and had that meeting last week, which was very fruitful. And they went over exactly what they're going to do with the kind of money they have. Had no idea that every drain on that roof leaks, and it leaks right over where the fire department people sleep when they're off duty. They're on duty, but it's a rest period for them. And it wasn't just this past year. It's been going on for 20 odd years. And apparently right after the building was put together, they had the company that did it come back and make some repairs, and they tore the roof apart, the flat roof area, not the upper roof, which is a metal roof, but the lower roof areas. And they're destroyed. And it should have been replaced 18 years ago, maybe. And it's been going like this for a while. And it wasn't just the roof repairs that they have to do. And it's basically the money they have, in my opinion, because they used to do these projects all over the country, not just here in Southern California. They need more money. But what's really bad is when they told me about, or they went over like who was the project manager, they didn't know exactly who the construction company was that put it together. Maybe they were afraid to tell me that, so I might hunt them down or something as a taxpayer. But they made so many mistakes. The walls leak. There's where the parking is, underground parking. They have below grade waterproofing issues. As where the
So I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I need to interrupt. This is well beyond brief report of a board member's activities, so it would need to be agendized for any further discussion.
Okay, well, I'm just saying what I went through, just meeting with the folks, and I want to say they're doing a great job trying to take care of everything that is behind the power curve right now for them, and I applaud them and Mr. Berkman for what he's been doing, trying to bring things up to snuff the way I remember them being when I was working as a construction consultant for many years. And things are improving, and maybe I'm taking up too much time, but all I can say is
I'm sorry, it's not time, Mr. Brennan, it's not time. Okay. It's that it's not agendized. And
I understand that.
The public, I'm sure, shares your concern. And so the Brown Act requires that they receive notice so they can participate too. The matter of your attendance at a site visit is perfectly appropriate. It's the extended discussion that is an issue.
If
I was actually just saying thank you to Mr. Berkman.
Mr. McDougall and Board Member Brennan, I was thinking, thank you for clarifying that, Mr. McDougall. It might be more appropriate to have this conversation as part of the CIP discussion, because that's where this visit made. So we can come back to that if you
Sure.
feel
I just want to say
appropriate.
thank you for what
Yeah.
you're doing and what they're
Absolutely.
doing. This is like, you're behind the power curve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you have any more comments on it, Mr. Brennan, we'll have an opportunity in item
Sure.
number 2 for you
Okay.
to elaborate. Great. So thank you. Thank you for being proactive to have that site visit. Now I want to go make a site
should.
visit too.
You should. Recommend it.
Great. Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, great. Well, thank you for those announcements. Do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
We have no one on the line, but we do have someone via Zoom that would like the opportunity to address the board.
Okay.
Okay. Christopher Matthew Spencer. I'll go ahead and allow him to speak to the board, and he has 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hey, folks, can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, gang. So you all know me probably by the way that I communicate with the city and how I've taken a strong interest, and I'm a local activist. My understanding, unless you have a different vision, is that the 5 minutes is basically whatever I'd like to talk about relating to this meeting. I took the time to review the agenda, and I have a lot of opinions about it, but I'd like to just focus on one thing. At my age, since I'm kind of young still, but old enough to have kind of been through a career, I've taken an interest in the community, and I've watched as the activities of these different agencies within the city conduct the city's business, and I've seen people come and go, and I've seen, as you've just heard a comment from one of the folks on the line here about mistakes of the past. I'm a moving forward kind of guy, and a lot of people don't like me because I'm very hard hitting and I have a lot to say. But when you're putting 200 grand into a donated, I use the air quotes, fighter jet, or you'd like to spend a couple $1 million on a golf course that I've never even played golf at, and I've spent some time at the golf course studying it, spoken to a lot of people who have golf memberships, talked to many of my friends who play golf, and I have a lot of opinions about it. But the golf course specifically fails to identify its prior losses and bring them forward. And when I asked about it, I was told that government agencies don't have to do NOL carry forwards. And while it's not legally required, I think that it is fraudulent to say that it's a self-sustaining activity when it has to be funded by taxpayers. So, I don't like things like free. I like things like taxpayer funded. Those are the kinds of things I like to hear. And if you want to steer clear of getting into trouble with voters or with residents, it's always a good idea to kind of dial it down a little bit and just be honest and tell people that the golf course is a total gift of public funds. It's not a self-sustaining activity. I don't have a problem with those ideas if people want it. I don't love my product. I want to know my customers. And if I want to know the customers, that would be the voters of Burbank. I've given a lot of different agencies time to think about my opinions, which are curated from other people's opinions. And I just would like for all of you to think very hard about your actions moving forward when you're talking about things like self-sustaining, free, or selling it hard. You're talking to a guy who made all his money in sales. If you sell it hard, you pitch it too hard, let people make their own decisions based on the facts. If the residents want something, they'll let you know, and they'll either let you know by electing you or asking you to leave or whatever. And I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I don't like when people say something is one way when really it's not. So that was all I had to say. Please put the money somewhere else other than a fighter jet. Start thinking about, think twice before you accept gifts from people, and really, think about the future. Labor costs are at a different place than they were in the past. And so, all you folks need to start looking at the realities of, CalPERS, cost of doing business, and all the luxuries we've had in the past may not always be practical in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other callers, Mr. Rosales?
We do. The next caller is Toby Kopp. I'll go ahead and allow him to speak. Toby, the mic is yours.
Hi, good evening, council members. Can you hear me? Great. I'd just like to comment on item G1 for the agenda, the proposed speed hump policy. Just as a bit of background, my family and I, we live on the 400 block of Eaton Drive between Glen Oaks and 6th. And I've been on there for about 7 years. Prior to that, I lived on Verdugo. So, I have a bit of familiarity with like speeding concerns. My wife also has lived in Burbank for her entire 44 years. So, there's some deep roots here. We have 2 young children attending Jefferson. And, I have concerns with respect to kind of the speeds that take place, coming off of Glen Oaks onto Eaton Drive. I've had correspondence with Ms. Workman, Sergeant Lieutenant Fromer, a number of different people. And, seeing this on the agenda kind of caught my eye. Eaton's a very wide residential concrete street. And, because of that, I know that it has been something where speed humps have been, not necessarily given full consideration that I would hope for. Under the proposal, it looks like I'm precluded from ever asking my neighbors if they would like speed humps because this new policy would prohibit it, even on like wide concrete streets. So for me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I know that it doesn't have quite the level of traffic Glen Oaks does, but it does feed into Glen Oaks, and I see people coming around that curve. I live closer to the Glen Oaks side of it. And, with young kids, it is a concern. There's not enough reaction time for a kid to deal with a car turning around the corner off of Glen Oaks, in my opinion. So I would ask, if it's a cost issue, there's not that many concrete streets in Burbank like that. So I'm really hopeful that we can incorporate this into the city program, go forward. And I know that there have been other neighbors on my street that have kind of voiced similar concerns. So just to be appreciative, if the council could take that into consideration. And, as opposed to like waiting for like an older concrete street or something to get deteriorated to the point where then you reconsider it. I don't have, the 10-year luxury of it with the kids growing up. And also just considering that, we're 2 blocks down from Jefferson. And I know that you've done new stop signs and you repaved and done a number of things right at Jefferson. So to be 2 blocks away, it just makes a lot of sense for me. And again, for consideration, if you could include that as, part of your thinking go forward and not eliminate it from the policy, I'd very much appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kopp.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosales, do we have any other
Yes.
callers or?
It looks like we have one last caller here, Michael Gogan. You have 5 minutes to speak, and you may now address the board.
Great. Go ahead, Mr. Gogan.
It looks like they're muted.
Mr. Gogan, there you go. You're muted.
Am I good now? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, cool. I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce myself. Some people here do know me, and I'm excited about that. I serve on a couple of committees within the city of Long Beach that deal with disabilities. I am a disabilities expert, and I'm sitting on the group that is dealing with the elderly in Burbank as well. The concern of purchasing a jet to put in a park, was that one of the items on your agenda?
No.
Was that yes or a no? I'm
So
asking.
we can only take comment. We can't answer questions.
Was that a simplistic question enough, a yes or a no for an answer? Well, if you were actually there to purchase a jet, there could be a lot of accidents that occur with that piece of equipment, especially when children climb all over it. I do know because being from San Francisco, there was just that kind of a layout in a park there, and there were a lot of accidents, and it was disappointing to see kids taken off by ambulances and things like that. I just thought I would voice my opinion against that idea, unless you're planning to have somebody watch over that area full time. There could be a lot of sad accidents that do occur. Otherwise, I appreciate this group for what you guys are doing. And thank you so much for allowing me to voice my thoughts tonight. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Gogan. Do we have any other callers or Zoom attendees?
So we have some attendees, but they don't have their hand raised to speak. So I believe this is the last caller.
Okay, great. And now is the time for brief board member comments. And also keep in mind that each of the items tonight that were addressed in public comment are going to be addressed later on the agenda. Would any of the board members like to make any general comments to our speakers? No? Okay, well, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for calling in tonight. I think this is a record that we've set for a number of callers. So I appreciate folks calling in and sharing your thoughts. It's good to know that there are folks out there looking at our agendas and looking at the budget. So thank you for sharing that. And I've taken notes. I'm sure others have as well. And we will discuss each item as it comes up on the agenda later in the meeting. I do have a question about public comment. Mr. Berkman, would this be a good time to ask it, or would it be better to bring it up during future agenda items? I just have a general question about public comment.
Mr. City Attorney, what do you think?
About how it runs.
Certainly.
Okay, so two questions. One is the public comment has 5-minute limit, correct?
Yes.
Who keeps track of that and who lets them know if Ms. Rosales?
Yes, that
okay,
would be
so
me.
it can rely on you. Okay, great. Secondly, I know we're going to be moving to in-person meetings again, and I'm just wondering if now's the time that I could voice my question, and it doesn't have to be answered, about whether or not calling in will be allowed in the future when we're meeting in person as well.
So City Council, I believe, is going to discuss that when they discuss the recommendation for returning to in-person meetings. I believe that might be on the forecast for April 12th. And there is a cost consequence for every board and commission to have staff to do that. Normally, the staffing is much less on in-person meetings. So I think that's one of the considerations council will address and likely set policy for all the boards and commissions as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to our consent calendar then, which is our approval of minutes. I believe we have discussion first before we make a motion, right? Would anyone like to make any comments about our minutes from February 24th? Mr. Jackson, you unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment? No. Okay. I actually have a question or two about clarification. Because my memory is a little bit foggy on a couple of these things, so I wanted to just get clarification. So under reports to board on the unfunded categorization, that's the first item on reports to board. About 4 or 5 items down, it says Chair Takahashi asked and staff noted the unfunded list is an internal ranking. Is that referring to, because we were looking at the unfunded list and the rankings of each of the items on the unfunded list. And I think the answer was that those rankings are internally to each department, right? Is that what you mean by internally? Yeah. Okay. Can we note that? Because for me, when I was looking at that, it was not really clear when it meant internal ranking. Was it internal per department, internal for the IOB? I wasn't really sure. So thank you.
Okay, I'll change it.
And then the second one, a little bit farther down, it says Chair Takahashi and Mr. Berkman agreed the board should discuss projects and utilize a motion to agree on changes to the unfunded list if needed. Was that for just that meeting by itself, or was that more of a general? I can't remember what that was referring to, because we were talking about how to pull an unfunded item basically for discussion. And I can't remember what the result, if we could get some clarification on that, would be great.
I believe what that was discussing each project kind of line by line, or if the board was going to bring certain issues or certain projects that they wanted to go ahead and change or move around on the list. I think it was just going to be a group discussion, and as it was discussed, then you all would make the decision based on where it would go.
Okay, for that particular meeting, right? Okay, great. All right. Could we just, yeah.
Madam Chair, anytime we are having a topic on the agenda, like the unfunded list, and an individual board member will suggest modifying it, then that should be a motion to be supported by the board if the change to go through. So specific to that meeting, but it holds true for all of our meetings.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. Ms. Coronado, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Takahashi. Just wanted to make a small amendment or an addition to my comment under reports to board where it says board member Maria Coronado inquired on the Olive Avenue Bridge scoring. So it says, and voiced preference for a newer bridge. The reason I voiced that preference is because of cost savings in the future under the handrail discussion when we were discussing replacing that handrail. So I just wanted to make an amendment there or an addition saying that for cost savings in the future after that comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so if I am recalling correctly, we have 2 amendments to the minutes, right? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended with the 2 amendments?
Motion.
Ms. Coronado, and forget, do we need a second? Or do we do a roll call? Second, okay.
Yes.
Second? Would someone like to second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Brennan, let's do a vote, please.
Okay, Armin Avazian? Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Walter Brennan Jr.?
Yes.
Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Greg Jackson?
Yes.
Vanessa Rochelle?
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi?
Yes.
And Jeff Vanderboort?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Let's move on to our reports to board. We have 2 reports to board tonight. Our first one is the updated speed hump policy. Who will be presenting that? Mr. Berkman, Mr. Hahn?
Madam Chair, board members, I will start and I'll introduce Traffic Engineering Manager Ed Yu. So thank you, everybody. This is exciting for us. The speed hump installation criteria, as it was called, was adopted by the City Council in 1996, and it was then revised in 1998. It's a couple of years since I started with the city as your director, and I know staff was looking at the speed hump policy based on resident input, and continued on with researching and surveying other agencies for their practices. And we're looking at this updated speed hump policy to better define the petition process and address issues like emergency routes and hilly streets. And the bottom line, I believe, we're looking to provide additional flexibility, open up the opportunity for more roadways to be petitioned and receive the speed humps. And this will be for the benefit of the community and the safety of our roadway users. So, Mr. Yu, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Director Berkman. Good evening, board members. It's a pleasure to be here today to present the new and revised speed hump policy for everybody. As Director Berkman stated, the staff here did a lot of work into finding out what other cities do. Can I get the presentation? I think I had a presentation, or can I share my screen at this time?
Yeah, you can share your screen.
Okay, here we go. There you go. Can everybody see my screen at this time?
Yeah, you're on the second slide. Yep. You can put it on slideshow if you want, so it could be full screen.
Oh, yes, I apologize.
From current slide. Yeah,
there you go. I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
Take two. Yes, Edward Yu, the traffic engineering manager. So, like I said, the Public Works Traffic Division spent a lot of time surveying the cities you see on this table. And one of the goals of surveying these cities was to find out what was the prevailing policies or criteria that other cities were looking at to install speed humps. And we found that most of them were similar to what Burbank, the existing Burbank criteria was, but there were a lot of differences and specializations for each individual city. The cities surveyed in this table were Glendale, the city of Los Angeles, the county, Pasadena, Santa Clarita, and what we call ITE, and that's the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And they're a national organization that governs a lot of the traffic policies and design measures that traffic engineers implement. And we looked at a number of different criteria, such as street classification, composition, the width of the street, the roadway of the street, of course, the alignment of the street, the grades of the street, volumes, and of course, speeds. And then one of the other criteria we always have to be cognizant of is, how does it affect our emergency services, our buses? And then the final criteria was, and it's across the board, and there was only one deviation from, was with the County of Los Angeles, where a petition is circulated amongst the residents to determine if they support the installation of speed humps. So the staff came up with this table, and this is the criteria we came up, which is if you look at the table, most of it is pretty similar to what we're proposing and was in the previous criteria. Just briefly, this is the previous speed hump installation criteria, and it's very simple in my opinion, and it's got a lot of the criteria, and it just talks about the basics of what Burbank criteria is having to offer. So one of the things that when I got to the city was we wanted to look at, I talked to my team and my staff about what were the concerns with the existing speed hump criteria and how we could improve it. How we could, one of these, some of the challenges that we noted were people were concerned about the hillside communities. People were concerned about the petition process. And then just to clarifying the criteria and how you were going to get speed humps. And so I did a comparison of what the previous criteria had in 1998 and then what we're proposing today. Street classification, the differences would be indicated in red in this table. Street classification, basically, if the local collector roadway is the only roadways that we will look at or evaluate for speed humps. And those are basically those basically are residential in nature. I know a caller came in and asked about, had a concern about concrete streets, and I can talk about that later, how we have some options there. And of course, no alleys for speed humps. Street condition, this is a new criteria that we've added. And we don't want to install speed humps because speed humps could be cause draining or flooding engineering issues that could cause, we want to install something that's going to solve a problem or help manage a problem versus creating another problem. And poor pavement. And one of the conditions we didn't want to go in there and keep in mind that all of these speed humps that we install are the city of Burbank installs. So a lot of times, so what happens is that we don't want to install a speed hump on a street that's will be repaved, and we have a robust paving program here. So we will wait till that street gets repaved, and then we'll go back and then we'll implement the speed humps. Street width, again, the only difference is we had 40 feet in the previous criteria, and now we've kind of added a 4 feet width for that. That's the width the maximum width we would like to see speed humps installed at. Street grades. This is a big change. Before, a lot of streets did not qualify because of the grade. The grade is an issue. Again, if it's too steep, we don't speed humps. Going over a speed hump could be abrupt, and we want to make sure that as a motorist goes over a speed hump, we don't want them to lose control and cause an accident at that point. So currently, what we're proposing today is a normal speed hump which is 12 feet wide and 3 inches tall, would be proposed on street grades less than 5%. Street grades that are between 5% or 7% or less than 8%, we are proposing what we call a speed table. A speed table is another type of speed hump that's deployed in a number of different cities, especially Los Angeles, where instead of it being 12 feet wide, it is 24 feet wide. So it's not as abrupt. And so on hillside communities and even higher volume street roadways, it's a better option at those locations. Horizontal alignment, which is being a street or roadway that has curves. One of the biggest things that we want to make sure is that as motorists travel down the roadway and at the speed limit or higher speeds than the speed limit, we want to make sure that the speed hump is visible from a certain distance. And we've reduced that visibility because to 150 feet versus 300 feet, which would allow us to include more roadways that had some horizontal issues. Traffic volumes and speeds. This is one of the, the name itself is speed hump, which is the speed hump is designed to manage speeding. It's not a tool to deter traffic from traveling down your roadway. So we have separated that category into two criteria. We would like the minimum speed for speed humps would be posted speed limit 25 miles per hour or less. And the critical speed greater than 30 miles per hour or more. The critical speed is the 85th percentile, and it's based upon the survey that we conduct. If you have a question about how we obtain a critical speed, you can please let me know after my presentation. So basically, for the indication of speeding, cars have to be going over 30 miles per hour at the 85th percentile. If they go 28, then it's kind of not, or 27 or anything less than 30 miles per hour, it's not really considered speeding. Traffic volume, minimum of 500 vehicles a day was on a previous criteria. The new criteria will say no more than 5,000 vehicles per day. This is minimum criteria is set because we want to make sure we install these speed humps in areas where we're addressing speeding issues due to non-localized traffic a lot of times. And we don't want to install speed humps where we have high traffic volumes, which could be detrimental to the community because it creates noise and other issues with the residents. Emergency routes. This is another big change we made. There were no emergency routes, and the challenge with emergency routes, we didn't want to hinder the response times for emergency services. And speed humps can do that because the fire trucks, one of the speed humps can cause delays. But within, in the past couple of years, we've looked at other cities and we looked at installing a different type of speed hump, which are called speed cushions, speed pillows. There are different names for it, but these are basically speed humps that have little slots cut out into them so that vehicles can go through it. If you're familiar, we do have some in a local area. There's one on Bel Air near the golf course that we've installed as a pilot program. The beauty of the speed cushions, we can install them on emergency routes where we're precluded before. But again, we want to make sure that our emergency services are aware of it and agree to it. So we can do a speed cushion on emergency route with the support of the fire department. Truck routes and transit routes. Truck routes was not included before, but we want to make sure that those types of vehicles can traverse the appropriate areas safely. The petition is pretty much the same. 80% have to be contacted, and 67% need to approve these speed humps. And approval means that they agree to a installation of a speed hump sign or pavement marking in front of the home. So this is what the new speed hump policy would look like. This is what the public would see. It describes the speed hump. It provides the advantages and disadvantages of speed humps. We want to make sure, because this will be something that will be very important as a person who's signing the petition. We make sure that anyone who signs a petition needs to read this. They acknowledge that they read it in the petition process, so they understand the challenges and advantages and disadvantages of the speed humps. Just quickly going over the advantages, of course, speed reduction, potentially reducing cut-through traffic, and then reducing accident frequency. Some of the advantages. The disadvantages would be increase in noise as vehicles go over the hump. It could create noise, potential delayed emergency response. Aesthetics, a lot of residents are concerned about the aesthetics of speed humps. And I've gotten comments about this is going to decrease my real estate value because now the perception is that they're speeding on the streets. So we want to make sure, and then additional signs and pavement markings can also cause an aesthetics issue for some residents. A traffic diversion, there have been instances where we've installed speed humps and it has controlled speeding on that roadway. But a lot of times, like I term a lot of things, the traffic is like water. They'll go from one location where they're hindered and they'll go to another street adjacent. And that's not really the intent of the speed hump, is to send traffic to other streets. So that we want to make sure that that's addressed also. Accidents caused by reckless drivers. Again, speed humps is not the catch-all for solving speeding or reckless driving or distracted driving. I mean, as someone who's determined to drive at a certain speed with speed humps or not can be a problem and cause accidents. So those are advantages and disadvantages. This is the new speed hump format that we're using to petition form. Just to highlight a couple of things, again, a speed hump petition, we do need a sponsor from the neighborhood. They are responsible for circulating and distributing the information to the residents. The key thing is that if you look on the left side of the screen, the undersigned must be 18 years or older. They must be the owner or authorized owner of the building or complex. Also, that was one of the challenges we had, is that multi-unit complexes, we want to make sure we simplified the process by getting one authorized, either representative, the manager or owner of the building, instead of going door to door to every single apartment in the building. So we wanted to simplify that process because we knew that was a challenge. Make sure, again, it indicates that they have to review the process before they sign it, and then they agree that a speed hump sign or payment marking may be installed in front of the residents. So that's the petition process that the sponsor would circulate. This is something we added recently to. We had concerns that sponsors were going to residents and nobody was answering the door, or they were non-responsive, and they really wanted to get their support, because we do require 67%. This is something that that the city of Los Angeles was also doing. They did a petition ballot. I know it's difficult to read, but hopefully it's in the package that you received. Basically, the petition sponsor could drop this off in their mailbox at the location, and then the resident could read about the information, and they could respond to us back in 3 different methods. Return it to the neighborhood representative, email the ballot to us, and then also mail it to us, and then we would incorporate that into the overall petition. So that's something we've added to reduce the burden on the sponsor and hopefully facilitate the process a little bit more. So that's my slideshow for this process. Hopefully I've been giving you I think what we've created today, the policy is very thorough and robust, and we've tried to address all the concerns that the residents and that have brought up to us to make this process a little bit easier. So if anybody have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, thank you, Mr. Yu. This is a good example of, with the creation of the Infrastructure Oversight Board, one of your duties as an advisory body to the council is to make recommendations on traffic programs. And this is a program level change that we definitely wanted to bring before you. Mr. Yu and his team, as hopefully you see, looking to provide increased flexibility and clarity for the speed hump petitioning and installation process. So with your discussions and hopefully recommendation, we can bring this forward to council for approval. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that clarification and information. And thank you, Mr. Yu, for your presentation and information. All right, colleagues, does anyone from the board have any comments or questions they'd like to start out? Mr. Jackson.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Mr. Yu, thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. The streets that run perpendicular to Glen Oaks, which is the area where I live, to the best of my knowledge, have no speed humps. However, when one goes east and goes into the city of Glendale, the streets do have speed humps on Allen and a number of other streets. Is that because Glendale had a more lenient policy with regards street grades than Burbank?
I don't know the history of the streets, and every request that we get, if we have a request on a street, we'll evaluate based on kind of criteria. I can definitely, if you give me the streets that you are concerned with or email it to me, I can definitely go back and see if we ever received a request for that location and what the priority is. And if they would like to resubmit a request, we can, under the new policy, we can definitely take a look at that.
Okay, well, my neighbors and I were thinking of it some years ago, and this is Harvard Road. We're told that it wasn't possible because of it being a collector street and also because of the grade. How is the grade determined?
Mr. Jackson, may
Yes.
I? Yeah, hi, through the chair. Mr. Yu, according to your city survey comparison, I'm going to guess that with Glendale's maximum grade of 8%, it's likely some hillside streets in Glendale would be able to receive the speed humps. And with our old policy of not greater than 5%, that's likely the situation. But now with our revision, with the speed tables from greater than 5% to 7%, that's one of the additional flexibility that we're trying to provide to the hillside communities, that some streets will likely be able to petition because the grade will be okay.
Yeah, that's what I suspected. But my other follow-up is, how is the gradient determined? Is that something that's in existence for all of our streets, or is that something you do on a case-by-case basis if there's a petition?
We have, Mr. Jackson, as-built of all of our streets. So we would look at the grade on the as-built.
On the as-built. Okay,
Right.
And that covers 1 block, 2 blocks?
Mr. Yu, that's the petitions are for 1 block at a time, correct?
One block at a time. Okay. The increase in width from 40 to 44 feet, is that from curb to curb, or is that from back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk? How is that 44 feet determined?
That would be 44 feet from curb to curb. And just to add on, we can evaluate multiple blocks if a sponsor would like to circulate the petition for multiple blocks, but the blocks have to be a minimum of 250 feet.
Okay, well, I measured my street this afternoon. It's 36 feet. Why are you suggesting that speed humps or speed whatever's not be allowed on concrete streets?
Well, the challenge with concrete streets, the speed humps are asphalt. And if on concrete streets, the asphalt does not adhere well, oftentimes, and the longevity of the speed hump may be an issue. However, we are looking at alternative means of concrete streets. There are some other types of concrete materials out there or devices out there that we're investigating to determine if they would be appropriate in our program. And I would, for instance, a bolt down type speed hump that we could bolt down in the street. But again, and then we're maybe looking at there's always different techniques and treatments that are being applied all the time. So we're always looking at different ways of a treatment that we could apply to the concrete street that may make the asphalt speed hump better on the concrete street. So right now, we prefer not to do it on concrete streets because of the longevity of it. However, we're not going to preclude it if it's an option and we can find other options.
Okay. I mean, wouldn't it be more prudent to, rather than completely ban speed humps or speed tables or speed whatevers on concrete streets, to give some flexibility to the city and its residents to seek, as what was the gentleman's name, Mr. Kopp mentioned? I don't know if is he on Andover? That's one of the streets I think that is concrete up in at least my part of town. Two more quick questions. The prohibition against speed humps in alleys. In some cases, alleys are used to bypass major thoroughfares. I don't know if we have any problems to that order in Burbank, although I think over in the media district, there are some fairly heavily trafficked alleys. I know in Venice, there's a street that's really an alley and it's called Speedway. And that generates an awful lot of traffic, an awful lot of speeding. Final question. Some time ago, I put out the suggestion that, given the problem that we're experiencing with people, if not running stop signs, rolling through stop signs, that we do a pilot program of putting speed humps or speed bumps or speed, whatevers, near stop signs. Has that ever gone anywhere, or like many of my suggestions, it's been left dormant?
There are proposals for speed humps at crosswalks and before stop signs. One of the challenges with that, again, is visibility. We want to make sure that cars aren't disrupted as they're hitting a stop sign. We want to make, a lot of times we want them to be able to see a speed hump in advance. And sometimes when they're going through an intersection or making a left turn, say you're at an intersection, you make a left turn, and if you have a speed hump that abruptly comes up, that could be a challenge for us. So we want to make sure before they hit a speed hump or they go over a speed hump that they see the signage, they see the pavement markings, they see all the indications to indicate that there's a change in terrain or pavement so that they can traverse the speed hump safely. That's one of our primary goals. And to address your question regarding alleys, again, we want to put the speed humps where they're most effective, and the challenges on our residential streets is something that we want to, address speeding on our residential streets, and that's why we said residential in nature. And we don't install speed humps on commercial areas also. So an alley, one of the challenges with alley, for one, it's concrete. And two, one of the things that we don't want to interfere is with drainage. And oftentimes alleys, the drainage is in the middle of the streets. So we don't want to, change that, the flow of the drainage there.
Okay, that's helpful. I think those are my questions. I would like to point out there are speed humps over in the Empire Center at stop signs, primarily over in the office park section of that development. Those are private streets. I guess they go under a completely different set of rules than city streets. But they're effective. You have to stop at the stop sign. And I know 2 or 3 people who have been in accidents by people running stop signs or running, slowing and then proceeding into the intersection and hitting broadside another car. Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think those were my questions on the matter. I think it's a good step forward to help the community calm traffic in their areas.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Do we have any other comments, questions? Mr. Avazian.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Mr. for the presentation. Just a question I have regarding apartment buildings and multi-unit lots. How the petition will handle the votes for those units?
So one of the challenges that we heard from the petition sponsors were that there was a challenge to go to every single unit and get, and especially during COVID, people weren't opening their doors, and a lot of times people weren't home. So one of the things that in apartment, one of the things that we've changed in the petition criteria is that we want to make sure that each property on the no matter how many units are available to them, is addressed as part of the speed hump petition process. And that's why we went to a representative, which would be the manager or owner of the building, would be the one that signs off on it. So that reduced the workload for the petition sponsor to go from door to door, and they could work with the owner or manager, and they can work with the residents in the building to indicate their support for the installation of speed humps.
So the way I understand, let's say if there is an apartment building of 3 units, say 20 units on a lot, they can count as one vote for the speed hump, not 20 votes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bazian. Mr. Vanderboort.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm glad we're updating our way of considering these speed bumps. I happen to live on a street on a block that has speed bumps. Very quick, and I'm grateful for that. A quick observation, and I don't know whether it matters or not, but under the advantages or disadvantages, most specifically the disadvantages, street cleaning equipment that we have currently has a little glitch or failure in that when these street cleaning trucks go over a speed bump, they leave the debris behind rather than take it. I know they try to do their best, and it certainly isn't the end of the world, but perhaps it can be listed so you'll have less of a complaint by people who may find themselves a little unhappy that some leaves are left behind in front of their house because of the street cleaning truck, the way they work. But thank you for this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Follow up with that, Mr. Yu. So how does street cleaning work with the speed humps? Would you expand on that a little bit?
Well, the speed hump is 3 inches tall and 12 inches wide for a normal speed hump. And the brushes would have to be lifted when it goes over the speed hump. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the street sweepers. I know that maybe someone else on the Public Works team can address it a little bit better than I, but I do know that's a challenge.
I see Mr. Rin there.
Thank you, Director Berkman. Board and Board Member Vanderboort, thank you for the comment. I have noticed it myself as well. I actually brought it to Mr. Yu's attention that it might be one of the disadvantages. And what happens with the street sweepers, and our field services can attest to this, they lose their vacuum when they approach the speed hump. And that's what happens. They lose their, whatever they had, in the vacuum compartment at the time they lose their vacuum. Unfortunately, it's just, we don't have a speed hump sweeper. I mean, we don't have something with a flexible end of their vacuum system to be able to contour over a speed hump to keep the vacuum intact. So that's why we're experiencing these little piles of debris just about every speed hump as they progress forward. And you see it a lot more, especially during the fall season with all the leaves falling. And it's just an unfortunate thing. I mean, I'm hoping residents might go out and help sweep up. I don't think we have the manpower in our field services to follow up our sweepers with a broom and dustpan to pick up those little piles. But hopefully they'll get kind of pushed more to the curb in another location. We'll get them next time.
Thank you, Mr. Rin. But if it's a comment that this board deems that we can definitely add that to one of the disadvantages on the policy.
I think that might be worth it because that is something that one might not think about, especially if they're right in front of their house that what's being proposed. Does the same thing happen with the speed table?
Yes, it would happen the same way also.
Okay. And the speed bump goes all the way across to the parking area too, right? So when the street cleaner comes down, it's going to go all, okay.
The only part it doesn't go over the gutter, the concrete gutters on the edges. It goes up to that point on both sides.
Yeah, Mr. Berkman, you unmuted.
Oh, yeah, to be clear, it goes on the asphalt, the dark part of the roadway. The gutter, for those who don't know, it's like 18 inches of the concrete next to the curb to allow storm water to pass and nuisance water to pass easy along the street.
Mr. Berkman, if I could add, Madam Chair, obviously most board members here would know there's a lot of our streets that do not have concrete gutters. So that definition, it terminates pretty much between 24 and 18 inches. It tapers down at the ends to allow drainage to occur properly. So I just want to make that clarification.
Thank you for clarification.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments, questions? Board members, Ms. Rochelle?
Yeah, I think I missed it. Can you explain what a cushion is? Can you describe that one more time? I think I missed it. Or maybe I didn't.
I was trying to look for a picture of it. Actually, as we were discussing it, I could still try to look for it. But I have me email you a picture if you would like. But basically, it's if you imagine a speed hump that spans the whole roadway, and in the middle, they're like slots where the tires could go into. So that way, it wouldn't be as abrupt for emergency vehicles. I can see if I can add.
Is it two slots or one slot?
Two slots. Two
slots?
Yeah.
Right. It's so emergency personnel can pass through the neighborhood street without any, or at least minimal, jarring to, picture someone in an ambulance, for example. You don't want to disrupt them.
So for heavy vehicles then, trash truck, fire truck?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I could probably find it in another town or around the county, but can you email that to me? Do you have a photo or a sketch?
Yeah, okay. Through the chair, Mr. Yu can send the picture to Ms. Rosales, and she can send that out to the entire board.
Great, thank you. Other comments, questions? Okay, I have a few questions and comments. Thank you, Mr. Yu, for your presentation and information. I'm glad to see this being updated, and it gives us an opportunity to really look closely at the guidelines and gives them some thought. So I have a few questions just to understand a little bit better the situation. So when let's say someone does get approved for speed humps, where does the funding come from to install those speed humps?
Well, currently the Public Works Department has resources to build each one of the speed humps. And from our estimate, based upon the labor and material, we can build approximately 15 to 20 actual speed humps a year currently. And that's not projects, it's just actual speed humps.
And then how many speed bumps typically does the city of Burbank add per year on average? Now, I guess COVID would be an exception because I think it was discontinued, or at least it was paused during COVID, but generally speaking.
Well, I'm not sure what the average is per year per se. Due to COVID, we had approximately 20 speed hump applications that we were evaluating this year, which encompassed the last couple of years. We've actually, and that, a lot of work goes into doing field surveys, doing volume counts, speed surveys, and all these different engineering criteria that we needed to evaluate. And I'm happy to say that most of them have been evaluated. I'll tell you the challenge we have with a lot of these projects is getting the petition back in time. And we require them to send a petition back to us within 1 year. I just wanted to emphasize that. That way, because after a year, the petitioners could change or the residents could change. We want to make sure we get the most current data available to us.
Okay,
Madam
great.
Chair,
Yes.
City Engineer Wren can confirm this, but given the, what we say, 15 to 20 humps that we can install a year, and typically 3 speed humps on a typical block, then you could say, 3, 4, or 5, somewhere in there, get installed each year by our crews. And also we need to remember they are a maintenance issue as well. So oftentimes we need to remove and replace them when we do the paving of the streets also.
Yeah, I was going to ask, that was my next question is when we repave the streets, does it automatically get re-put back in, or is there another study, or is that part of that process?
They're removed and replaced.
Okay. Are the speed humps ever removed entirely once they're put in? Is it ever established that they're no longer needed, or the street has changed, or the traffic patterns have changed, or a resident moves in and doesn't want it in front of their house? Does it ever happen?
We do have residents, and we did have a resident recently express to us that they would like their speed humps removed. And the process would be the same. As far as the petition process, we asked them again to go back to become the sponsor and go back to the residents and get a petition to get the speed humps removed.
Okay, and you would do again
We wouldn't need to do all the criteria and engineering survey that go along with it. Basically, we would send them, we would ask them to circulate a petition. If we received the petition, then we would, and it was valid, then we would remove the speed humps accordingly.
At the 2/3 support level.
Okay.
Same criteria, 67% of approval that they want to remove the speed hump, and 80% must be contacted.
Okay. And is there any time criteria that the speed bump has to have been installed a certain amount of time, or that is it, because let's say 2 years ago it's installed and then someone comes along and says, wait, we don't want it, and tries it again. So then I'm just curious.
I wouldn't preclude it. I mean, again, if that's the, that's the will of the residents, then we'll definitely address them as we can, as much as we can.
Okay, great. And then after installation, is there a follow-up to see whether the impact of it on traffic patterns or anything like that?
Again, we don't necessarily do a post-speed hump installation study, but there have been on occasions where we can do a post-speed study. And we have, and a lot of times we do notice that the speeds do go down, about 5 to 7 miles per hour a lot of times. And that's why I've always considered speed humps as one of the better traffic calming devices for speeding. So it is effective. It is effective, but again, there are disadvantages that we've all spoken about that come along with speed humps.
Yeah. Is there any special consideration for the areas like around schools or parks or where there's children that might give that particular area a little bit more attention or more reason to want to have speed bumps to reduce speeds around that area?
That's not currently as one of the criteria that we evaluate. Again, schools have a lot of volume. They have a lot of, changes in, directions, and there's a lot of activity. But we treat it as any other residential neighborhood where they can definitely apply for the petition process. We do include the school in the petition. We ask that they obtain either the principal's signature support or the school support for the installation of those speed humps, since they are an impacted property from the speed humps. Because a lot of times they have school buses and things like that, and that may preclude them from having speed humps because of school buses.
Right.
And Madam Chair, empirically, from my experience in multiple cities, by default, areas around schools and parks are the most requested areas, just by the people who move in and live around them. Typically have more children and see more children, so it naturally is basically human instinct to say, let's make this a little safer and slower.
Right. And I'm thinking too that pedestrian traffic, especially with pedestrians that have young children, or maybe they're riding their bikes and things like that, might be, another signal for folks. If they're maybe 2 or 3 streets down from a school or from a park where there's a lot of kids on that block or something. Okay. If a resident, so I'm glad to hear that most of them are the ones that fill out all the forms and get all the petitions, and most of them are approved. But in the cases where they're not approved, does the city work with those folks to, let's say they don't meet the criteria for enough cars going on the street, or some of the other criteria that they have no control over? Does the city work with them about other ways that they can reduce speeds, maybe bulb outs or other kinds of traffic calming?
Absolutely. Again, when people request, us to evaluate the speeding on a roadway, we don't want to wait for speed humps. Sometimes, we will look at other measures, signage, pavement markings, and other ways of enforcement. Education. A lot of times too, we look at different ways of trying to improve the situation. And again, speed humps is one of the options we have in our traffic calming toolbox that we can use.
Okay, so it's good to know that's not the only tool that residents have. Okay, so that leads me to my last question, which is kind of similar to what Mr. Jackson was talking about earlier, which are the streets above Glen Oaks, above Burbank High. That's a well-known area in our city where it's off the main road, and a lot of kids, teens, just folks going around the high school for various reasons use those side streets as either pass-throughs or as places to enjoy their time after school or whatever. And those are the areas where I've heard the most in the community. There's concern about speeding on residential streets, and I'm wondering, for the ones who are on that, because it said it's a slope, right? And that's probably one of the reasons why some of those don't have speed humps, is because of potentially the slope. I'm wondering if the 7%, will that be enough for those streets? So I'm hoping that if that might be the stopping point and give them another, opportunity. I'm just looking at the 7% and wondering if that's enough for those folks over there. I'm curious, what was the thought process for 7% for our Hill folks, people that are in the area up there? What was the thought process for 7% versus 8% in Glendale?
Well, again, it's less than 8%. I usually use 7% as a gauge. So, again, we are looking at ways of, we don't want to install a device or traffic calming measure that could create, other problems. And, the challenges with slopes and heavy grades that, again, if they're traveling high speeds and we don't want them to hit a speed table in this instance that would kind of cause additional accidents. And keep in mind, one thing I wanted to look at is that although we are including speed tables in our policy, the speed table is double the size of a speed hump, which requires an area double the size of a normal speed hump. So they have to fit in between 2 driveways. They cannot cover manholes, water valves, all these different things. So that's why we have to make sure we conduct a thorough engineering field investigation where we're looking at these things. So they meet all the other criteria, but when we go out there to actually place them and design them, there may be a manhole or there may be driveways that are too close for us to install that speed table.
Right. And you have discretion to look at street by street, right? That perhaps they meet all the criteria, but that particular street has a difficult placement situation okay. Because I think, I like Glendale, personally, I like Glendale's 8%. And they have the speed humps on their streets that are at that grade and they're working. And unless there's some sort of indication that it's too steep, I think maybe that might be something to consider, is to 8% and lower rather. I know you said it's 5 to 7. I see 5 to 7% in here, but maybe 8% is the maximum. And then each street you can look kind of street by street, whether, even though 8% is the maximum, maybe that street isn't going to work because, again, placement or something. But I think that for the hill streets above Glen Oaks, just personally, man, I'd love to hear the opinion of the other folks on the board. I would love to see a little bit more flexibility with giving them options to look at and be considered, even if maybe other things may keep them from getting the speed humps. At least that percentage grade isn't going to automatically preclude them from even looking. Does anyone else on the board have a thought about that? Or I live on the flats, so I'm just basing it on what I know from what I've heard from people who live there and having driven around that area and knowing folks who live up there. But if you live up there or you know more, please feel free to chime in. Yes, Mr. Yu, did you have a comment?
I'm sorry, Chair. One of the things I would like to do, again, because 8% is higher than most people we serve, areas that we surveyed, and I'd like to have a discussion with Glendale to see if they've found any challenges with the 8% grade versus less than 8%, and then if that's something that the board is recommending, then I can revise the policy. If that's something that the board is recommending to us, I can look at revising the policy indicating 8%. But again, anything greater than 8%, I would definitely not recommend. But again, our policy is 5 to 7%, but we're going to look at anything less than 8%.
Madam Chair and board members, for your consideration, I know, for example, the ITE guidelines allow up to 8%. And as we're talking about, Glendale apparently allows up to 8%. I'm thinking the ITE guidelines, we have to remember how dense our population is, how many cars there are parked. We have more housing elements coming in with SB 9 and ADUs. So what type of area traffic-wise are we talking about is a consideration for the street grade. My suggestion, since this is going from 5%, going another 40% of that grade, it is relatively steep. And I would suggest we try this and see how it goes. I think some streets that people have asked to get speed humps will be included. And if for some reason, if there's, a lot of issues raised to say, oh, I'm so close, that's why I can't get speed humps, we can always come back to the board in a future year or two to investigate this. And that's just my suggestion to keep it at this 7%. I do have concerns of going to 8%.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan, you have a comment?
Yeah, living on the hill like you do, I would say that it's a great idea, except I notice people coming downhill rarely stop at the stop signs. It's like you never know. Hopefully they'll stop, but not necessarily. And that's coming downhill as well as going up the hill. And I've seen people just can't believe it. So it is unsafe sometimes. So maybe the speed humps at a stop sign or near a stop sign coming downhill might not be a bad idea. Of course, they'll probably wreck their car with that, since they like going through stop signs, but it might slow the traffic down a little bit, especially during rush hours. You'll see people just, even on the, not so much Country Club Drive, but Sunset Canyon, which is parallel to the hill, and people just blow right through the stop signs. Mm-hmm. So it's possibly that's not a great idea here. Slow down the traffic.
Mr. Workman?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I know Mr. Yu will agree. There is there's mandatory braking action coming up upon a stop sign, and for the city to put in speed humps adjacent to a stop sign can, Mr. McDougall, put us at the risk of having people. It's not meant to be strong braking actions over the speed hump, so that's a concern, and that's why the parking lots the private parking lots have these speed bumps. So the humps are the bigger, longer ones. The bumps are the short ones that really jar you, and they have them. I've seen them in my own town just before the stop sign, but you are traveling in a parking lot supposed to not more than 10 maybe 15 miles an hour. So you're looking and you see them, and that's why they're also yellow and very much highlighted in the private parking lots. So just for the board's information.
Yeah,
That's
at
helpful.
the end of the day, we need the city engineer to be able to approve whatever the design is as quote unquote safe, meeting standards. We are a magnet for, dangerous conditions, whether that be roadway, whether that be road curvature. The city is safe, and Mr. Berkman and Mr. Yu have, provided statistics on how safe the city is compared to many others. It doesn't stop people from doing imprudent things, but we want our professionals to be able to approve the plans as safe to the relevant standards. So, that's our general guideline is we have to have our people stand behind the design. And I know that staff is committed to looking at many other tools, going back to your earlier question, to create safer, traffic patterns, travel habits.
Thank you. To that point, does traffic have discretion both directions to make exceptions? So they have these guidelines and these requirements, but let's say a street just is determined not to be a safe place to put speed humps, even though it has every other criteria, or the other way around where it may be, 7.2%, or there's some other criteria that's really close, but it seems like a really good candidate. Is there some level of discretion to be able to, or are these hard, fast, once this is decided, this is a hard, fast system that has to be it?
So from our perspective, once we set it, we're going to assume it was set with our best engineering judgment and recommendation.
Right.
So they would always have the ability, of course, to make a decision that under the circumstances, because of driveways or drainage patterns, that it wouldn't be prudent to install them under a condition that otherwise, checks the boxes. It would be a little bit more challenging to explain why we approve something at variance with our standards, because otherwise you would think that was incorporated. So if we think there would be special conditions, then we'd want to footnote what those were so that there was a basis for the exceptions, and that the record was clear, and that the policy was clear on its face where the variances could be given.
Great, thank you. Any other? I think Ms. Coronado, you might have had your hand up.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Takahashi. I just wanted to weigh in a little bit as well, because I live on the hill up here. And there's times when I park my car and I go to get out of it, and somebody speeds by. I swear they must be doing 80 or 90 miles an hour. And that must be the same individuals that may be blowing through those stop signs. And I know, being close to the high school, we have youthful indiscretion that happens. So hopefully, I know that we do have challenges. I just hope that we can come up with some good solutions for this area, because it is concerning when you go to pull out of the driveway. It's almost paranoid, taking a look, trying to make sure that there isn't somebody going by at that speed. And also, just safety's sake, there's a couple of children that live across the street, and I see them on their scooters, and I pray for them that nothing bad will happen. So hopefully we can come up with some solutions. And a question I have is, how would a resident, I guess I could call the city and find out what is my slope? How would a resident find that information? Where would they call to find out that information, just to see if they're even eligible for that?
They could, Board Member Coronado, they could reach out to the engineering division, 818-238-3915, or on the website, of course, the city's website. And staff can look up any street grade in the city in a specific area.
Thank you. And one further question, because we had some discussion about stop signs, I feel like I can bring this up. And I've brought it up in the past, where I've been driving through our city and I've seen stop signs that have obstructions, branches, leaves, those type of things. We brought up the 311 app earlier about potholes. Before we began this meeting, we had a short discussion about that. Is that someplace where I could report that if I found a stop sign that had some obstruction, where maybe they're not even seeing the stop sign and that's why they're blowing through it? Because there are some that are questionable.
Yes. I don't have it open, but I think the 311 app has an other request. And also the citizenry, they can reach out to the Public Works Field Services building at 818-238-3800. And I know Parks and Recreation Director Marissa Garcia put her video on, so she'll probably elaborate on a number maybe to call, because Parks Forestry Division takes care of a vast majority of the city trees. Marissa or Ms. Garcia?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Marissa Garcia, Parks and Recreation Director. As Mr. Berkman mentioned, the request can go through Public Works, and they will notify Parks and Recreation, or anybody can call Parks and Recreation. Forestry number is 818-238-5340, or 5330, which is our general admin line. And I know that, as Mr. Berkman mentioned, the 311 app, there's an other. There is, as that 311 app is expanded, I don't recall if it's phase 2 or phase 3, which will happen later this year. There will be specific categories for trees, parkway trees, and tree requests. So that definitely is in the works. But in the meantime, certainly give us a call or work with Public Works. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the information. I'll be doing a study, and I'll be making some calls myself. So, and also thank you, staff, for the report.
Yeah, thank you. That brings up a good question, Ms. Coronado, about assessing whether there's other issues going on before requesting a speed hump. So would you recommend, as staff, would you recommend that if folks are interested in, speed humps or potentially traffic mitigation, that they contact you to kind of do an assessment of their street to see, is that possible, to see like what might be other ways that they could have that conversation about, like perhaps the stop sign is covered by trees, or perhaps there is some other situation that's causing speeding in that street?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I discuss with residents about the issues challenges they're facing, I want to make sure that I'm hearing about the problem, not necessarily about the solution. Like a stop sign is not a solution for speeding, as evident by this conversation we're having, that people roll through them. There's really, we have a pretty good toolbox to address a lot of different issues. But it's limited by a lot of different avenues of resources and problems. Again, not every solution is going to be viable all the time. So we're continuing to look at different ways of evaluating things. But when I talk to a resident, I want to make sure that we're hearing about the problems and not just necessarily jumping to a stop sign. But we will try to recommend and help them in any way we can to address the issues at hand.
Great, thank you. I see, Mr. Jackson, that you've unmuted. Did you have a question?
Just one final comment. 35 years ago, I worked for the LA City Council. And after seeing some speed humps in other jurisdictions, specifically Pasadena, I tried to persuade the city leaders or city engineer and his staff to allow speed humps in certain areas, residential areas. And they said, no way, can't be done at all. And so I'm heartened that I've lived long enough to see it become somewhat of a accepted practice to calm traffic in residential neighborhoods. And I applaud staff for looking ways to make it more flexible. Thank you.
Very well stated. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Okay, any other comments or questions before we wrap up? This is a great conversation. Thank you so much for this opportunity to have this conversation and to look at these guidelines.
Mr. Board Member Avazian has a question.
Oh yes, Mr. Avazian.
Right. Just one recommendation, if that's possible, to include some kind of sketch or dimensions or very basic exhibit type of drawing that shows the layout of the speed bumps and speed lumps and basically some kind of very basic details as part of the policy.
Yes, as part of our engineering field investigation, what we do is we mark out, we do an investigation where we can put the speed humps, and we include that in the package we sent to the petition sponsor, where we are potentially proposing a location of the speed hump, so that as the petition is passed around, the resident can see approximately, again, where we could put the speed humps. That's something we added also.
Excellent. That's good information to know because the residents will want to know that. Okay. Is there anything else? Before we wrap up on this, I just wanted to get kind of a temperature of the room about that percentage grade. How does the board feel about leaving it as is, or do we want to request Mr. Yu to do more? You're going to already look in, Mr. Yu, you're going to already look into the 8% in Glendale, right, and see how it's going, regardless of what our recommendations are today.
But again, the recommendation here is for you to provide your comments, and hopefully we can go to the council with the policy so we can get these hillside communities addressed as quickly as possible. So that way we can hopefully make these streets a little bit safer and calm down the I call it speeding pandemic that's happening.
Right.
In the world.
But you are going to check with Glendale regardless. Okay, great. Okay.
I'll follow up with them and see the challenge. But I do suggest that we recommend that we go with what we have, the current policy, so that we can bring this, because I can't implement it until we get approval from the council. So
right.
So that we get it out.
Would it be possible in your report to council that once you do confer with Glendale about the 8% to include the results of that information? Just, I think that would be just good to know, because they may end up having the same conversation. And so having that data there may allow them to, you won't have to redo this again because that information will be there.
I'll definitely include that in my discussion. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion do we have to make a motion for this or just note and file? I can't remember. Hold on, let me look at the.
Madam Chair, there would be a motion. I do want to point out, I see Board Member Vanderboort unmuted, that there was a potential modification to include in the disadvantages some verbiage about the street cleaning could be impacted, so we can make sure folks know about that.
Yes, thank you for the reminder on that item. Did you have a further comment, Mr. Vanderboort?
No, Madam Chair, just wanted to make a motion.
Okay.
If you're
with the amendment?
Yes, if you're ready, then I'll make a motion that this report with the revised, updated speed hump policies be forwarded to council with our recommendation for their approval, subject to a couple of modifications. Number one, that the issue of disadvantages be modified to add the wording about the issue of street cleaning and its minor impact. And now I'm blanking on the second one. I'm with Mr. Avasi, and I would like to include in the recommendation that staff add a generic little diagrammatic map that shows to people who are looking, perhaps even online, how speed bumps look. Perhaps it's a matter of a couple of pictures or something that'll just make it easier. Just as it came up, Ms. Rochelle wonder what these speed bump pillows look like. Most people don't live near one. I happen to live near one, so I know what they look like. But I would like to see some additional visual material be added to the package that is provided for the public to understand the process. So that's my motion.
Thank you. Ms. Rosales, did you catch the two amendments, and is it clear?
Would you be able to simplify it for me just a little bit?
Yes, and again, it's the amendments are number one, that the disadvantages list provided by staff include a comment about the street cleaning debris that usually is associated or accumulates around speed bumps. And then the second one is that a generic diagram be prepared for the public to understand a little more what a speed bump looks like and its general placement, etc. An indication of, here are driveways, speed bump must be placed between driveways. The description Mr. Yu gave us.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Thank you.
Do we need a second for this one, or we do just a vote? A second?
Yes.
Who would like to do a second? Ms.
I actually have
Coronado? Yeah.
I think there was one more thing that we were considering, and that was the study on concrete streets, right? We wanted to make sure we added that because in this proposal, it says no concrete streets. But Mr. Yu had mentioned he would take a better look at that. And in consideration of the caller we had today, I just wanted to add that so that would be our recommendation as well to make sure those residents.
Could we deal with it simply as a request to staff to bring this back to us within a year with their recommendation or an update on the concrete streets? Because it appears, so you told us that they're considering options, but the cost and considerations of the ability for asphalt to adhere, et cetera, may be a problem. Just giving us an opportunity to review this one more time, but not necessarily make it part of this revised policy. And the same thing would be for the percentage, the speed percentage. And I think that this board would very much like to see this come back to us within a year for a quick update to see whether that 7% has become 8%, et cetera. Certainly the council has the ability to do it on their own between now and then if Mr. Yuso recommends. But from my perspective, it would be more like bring it back for us to chime in if that's okay with the board, and that's the motion again.
Yeah, would that be a reasonable request, Mr. Berkman, or?
That's quite a motion.
Well, so
it's like two separate things. I think there's a motion and a request.
So procedurally, the mover declined to amend. So you have a motion with two amendments, but the mover also added a return in 1 year with a report. Is that part of your motion, or is that a suggestion?
No, thanks for saving my rear end. I don't want Ms. Coronado upset with me. So, that was my suggestion.
I think it was a request, but not part of the motion.
If the motion is ready to be seconded, and if it's ready to be reviewed, and if not, it can die for lack of a second, and someone can make another motion.
Okay, so I think the motion as it stands with the two amendments, I believe, with a side consideration with the other two items as a request to come back, but that's separate.
Madam Chair, the way Mr. McDougall said it was perfect, which is the motion with the two additions regarding street cleaning and add diagrams and requesting staff to come back in a year.
Okay.
With an analysis is fine.
Second, I will second the motion.
Okay. Coronado seconds. Now it's time for a vote.
Alrighty. Armin Avazian.
Yes.
Walter Brennan Jr.
Yes.
Maria Coronado.
Yes.
Greg Jackson.
Yes.
Vanessa Rachel.
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi.
Yes.
And Jeff Vanderboort.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good job, everyone. Thank you so much for that report, Mr. Yu, and for the discussion.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Night.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I'm doing this right, it's my time to advise the board that we've reached past 90 minutes. We've accomplished a great moving of our speed hump policy. I was wondering if anybody wanted a 5-minute break or anything before we proceed on our CIP. Mr. Vanderboort, I saw his hand up as well.
Madam, thank you, Mr. Berkman. Madam Chair, I just wanted to ask forgiveness, but I will be leaving you in about half an hour. So I just wanted you to know that if I sign off, it's not because I got tired of anything, but I just can't stay beyond that time.
Okay, noted. Well, why don't you volunteer? If you have anything to ask, we'll have you go first after the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Would we like a bio break? Raise your hand if you want a bio break, 5 minutes. No, I'm good. Okay, let's forge ahead. But if you do need a bio break, please, of course, take care of your body.
Public Works, our director, I think, needs a break. Do you need a break, Mr. Berkman?
Thank you very much. I didn't see whose square lit up, but Ms. Coronado, thank you. I'm good to go. I will plow along with you.
Okay.
I was going to say, make it 3 minutes instead of 5.
There you go. 1.5. Speed to the bathroom and back. Okay. Let's forge ahead with the updated fiscal year 2022-23 proposed CIP program.
Right.
I think that's Mr. Hahn.
Yeah,
Mr.
Madam
Berkman,
Chair, board members, I'll get us going. Staff is here from various departments as well, like last month. So at our last meeting, February 24th, we presented our draft fiscal year 22-23 capital improvement program and received comments from the board. We also went to the Development Oversight Committee, or DOC, on March 7th. That's our a committee comprised of staff and executives from all the departments. And there were a couple of revisions to the proposed program that Mr. Hahn will present to you. And with that, Mr. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Good evening, Chair Takahashi and members of the board. Excuse me, I went to the wrong screen. Let me share the right screen. Let's see, share screen. Sorry. Just grab it and put it in here. Thank you. So tonight I have before you the updated CIP program.
Gotta find the right screen, Mr. Hahn.
Am I in the wrong screen? Is this
your email is up. There you go. Now you got it.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to briefly or just go over the changes that were made from the previous presentation that we had in February. So item number 6, the fuel tank replacement. Previously, we had $10,000 in here, and that was just for design. And based on the workload and the staff availability, we believe that we could actually do the design and construction for this. So we increased the dollar amount to $260,000 to include design and construction. And that comes not from Measure P, but the restricted Vehicle Equipment Fund 532. And projects, items 7 and 8, the 2 parts projects, they actually changed the funding source from a Measure P to the restricted funding source that they have in parts, so that they could actually fund these 2 projects. And the funding amount for the shade structure actually also was lower from the last presentation we had in February. And then item number 14, the DeBell Golf Course. I think we had a brief discussion last month saying that the 3 projects were actually combined into one multi-year project. So the request for this year is $475,000. And then in the future years, they'll be asking for additional funds to continue to make improvements on the DeBell Golf Course. And also the Starfighter project. So we actually lowered the requested fund from $50,000 to $15,000. And this is just to do a structural analysis and the condition to assess the integrity of the structure. And also the scoring actually went from 8 to 13. That actually is due to our legal requirement. We actually have a contract with the federal government, and the project description, actually I didn't get a chance to update that information, but I will update that prior to the council meeting. And item number 20 actually went from the restricted to the unrestricted Measure P funds, and that actually fell below the line. So more likely than not, this project will not get funded for this fiscal year, and then it will land on the unfunded project list. And then for the multi-year project, actually, we actually added additional funds to the item number 18, the PD Headquarter flooring project. This is an existing project that we actually will be going into construction probably sometime around June to July, I believe. And because of the schedule that we have, we were able to, we believe that we could continue on next fiscal year to continue to replace the flooring for the PD and fire headquarters. And this is a multi-year project. So we added for this fiscal year, $210,000. And we will be asking for additional funds the next 2 years also, next 2 budget years, so that we could actually replace all the flooring at the PD and fire headquarters. So this is just the project sheets that were updated, and basically, as I shared with you, the fuel tank fuel tank replacement, the construction dollars were added so that we could actually do the construction. The ball field shade structure, we changed the funding source from the Measure P to the restricted. The ball field lighting modernization at Cambridge changed from the unrestricted Measure P to the restricted parks funding source. And then the Bell Golf Course annual improvements. So went from 3 projects into a multi-year projects, and we will be working with the operators to make sure that they're actually following procedures and protocols and making sure that whatever they're doing, as far as if it needs engineering, that we will review the documents to make sure that they are doing everything according to the standards that needs to be put in. And then the Starfighter aircraft, we have, I'm sorry about this. The design, it's only $15,000. The $150,000 for future years for 23, 24. It may not even be that high. I think the study for next fiscal year will indicate exactly what changes or what improvements that we would have to make, so that we will have a better number actually after the analysis. And we have the max and ball field fencing. This project went from restricted funds to unrestricted funds, and it fell below the line. So most likely, like I said earlier, this will be a part of the multi-year project, or the unfunded project list. And then the multi-year project, this is the project that was added for the flooring for the PD and fire headquarters. And this is we're requesting $210,000. And then we will be requesting additional funds in future years out so that we could actually finish it. And we're not requesting a one-time because it will be really difficult to do the replacements of the floor all in one time in a building that's actually being used. So that concludes the updates on the changes that were made. And I am available for any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Since Mr. Vandervoort needs to leave us a little bit, why don't you go first, Mr. Vandervoort, with your comments, questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate that you allow me to do this, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some of the wise comments from everybody else if this doesn't close up quickly, and I suspect it won't. But let me just briefly tell you again what I believe, that this is where, for us as the Infrastructure Oversight Board, this is where the rubber hits the road, meaning this is where we feel we should provide our most careful and thoughtful input to council, considering that this came to the whole purpose or the existence of these funds came from a promise to the public that money would be used wisely, and it's my belief thoroughly that it is being used wisely. But as we get to the point where there are competing interests, we must always make difficult decisions. And I, for one, expressed before a concern about a couple of things that still appear to be here. One is the Parks Master Plan, and Ms. Garcia has earned my respect to her for her work. So it's not at all a comment that staff is wrong in doing this. It's just simply that I feel, and I know Ms. Becker is here as well, but I feel that when we are doing infrastructure projects, a master plan, in my opinion, does not qualify any more than, say, security personnel would qualify for parks, or I'm probably not very good at making analogies, but the point that I personally make, if the board concurs with me, and other board members may disagree completely, and if so, no problem, it will move forward. But I feel that this is not how our infrastructure, hard-earned dollars, and what I mean by that, I mean dollars that really where we asked people to dig into their pockets and pay an extra 0.75% sales taxes, and it's substantial. So I think that this is where the general fund or some other means should be tapped. I suggested last time that if there was some component about assessment of our park facilities, maybe you could justify a portion of this. So I'll leave it at that, and Madam Chair, you and others will discuss this, and it'll go where it goes. Then, with respect to the Bell Golf Course, I still feel that this is, again, not where the priorities should be. Madam Chair, am I going far afield here? Or are you okay with my continuing?
Oh, please continue.
Okay, yeah. So this is, again, a little bit like that first speaker who commented on his perspective of the golf course. First of all, I don't think I'm under the impression that the golf course is self-sufficient. Far from it. The city had for years funded millions and millions of dollars to keep it afloat. They just simply decided that it couldn't continue to survive on its own as an independent fund, and therefore it has been absorbed as part of our park and recreation services, which it is. It is a park, but it's also a very peculiar park, one in which very few people pay for the ability to access it. The public basically has access to the restaurant and to walk around the streets, but certainly not in their facility. So I still feel that I, for one, do not support the idea of spending $475,000 and perhaps $400,000 again next year, et cetera. And again, this is my personal opinion as one board member, and other board members may feel otherwise. And it's not to take away the value of golfing, which I've done there many a time, but just recognizing that it's really a very different service than our park and recreation, where you can go play with a frisbee or with a soccer ball or with anything with your children or as adults. So that's my other quick observation. I mean, I see the other changes. As a side comment to the other speaker who spoke of his recommendation not to buy a jet. He's about 25 or 30 years late. We already own it. We took it as a gift. And as the saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished. We now have to take care of it. So for that speaker, we already own the jet. We have it and we have to maintain it. And so staff is precisely responding to a requirement that we maintain it. I think staff can probably expand of that if necessary. Madam Chair, other than that, I am delighted by the process that we have followed, and also appreciate what staff has done since our last meeting to try to modify and adjust things a little bit. And I suspect that even when we're all done, staff will make some of the minor adjustments between now and the council, because these things are alive. They're going to change. And I don't have any concerns with that, as long as perhaps staff just reports back to us if there's a minor adjustment or something for math reasons or other financial reasons, so that this doesn't stop staff from moving forward to the council. So with that, I appreciate you letting me go forward, and I'll pay attention and see where this goes. If any of my comments have wheels and others have the same interest, or if I just simply have said my piece, and if anyone in the council will watch this, they will know how one board member felt.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderboort. Would staff like to respond to any Mr. Vanderboort's comments before we move on to another board member comment, or? No? Okay. Ms. Bergman? No? Okay. Oh, Ms. Becker, yes.
Go ahead and address the park facilities master plan. Basically, our choices for funding the plan would be unrestricted general fund dollars or unrestricted $534. Again, we elected to use infrastructure funds because it is a facilities master plan, the same way we were using infrastructure funds to do the public works, the facilities review. So it's a similar project, which is why we elected to use a similar source of funding. Certainly I can suggest or discuss proposing to use general fund dollars instead, but that of course then has to compete with all of the other department requests for general fund dollars. So it does make the likelihood of the study moving forward maybe not as good as if we were to use infrastructure dollars.
Yes. Mr. Vandenborg.
Madam Chair, a quick question from Ms. Becker. Did I misunderstand that the Bell Golf Course is going to yield somewhere in the vicinity of $1 million of revenue this year, over and above what was expected before? And are those funds allocated for something, or are they fungible funds that are part of the general fund?
They are part of the general fund, so that revenue essentially goes to support all of the city's programs and services that the general fund supports. But yes, DeVel is doing considerably better than expected due to revenues, and a lot of that has been a result of some of the previous infrastructure improvements we've made to DeVel. So I do understand the concern as far as prioritizing different city projects. The golf course is an asset, and it went a number of years without any maintenance or updates because of this exact reason, the resistance to want to put money into the golf course when we had limited funds, right? So now we have this backlog of maintenance that we need to do for the golf course, both for safety reasons and to enhance the quality of the golf course, just like we've done with our pools, our tennis courts, our roller hockey facility, all of those different things that are, maybe a priority to one person and not a priority to the other. But the golf course specifically went a number of years without really any updates or infrastructure improvements. And we are seeing that as we make those improvements, the course itself is doing better financially.
Madam Chair, thank you, Ms. Becker. And it's not at all to argue your point. It's just simply to remind ourselves that a master plan is really not a facility study. Just unless I'm missing something, and perhaps this is your opportunity to tell me that I'm wrong, but I think isn't a master plan something that we create that will guide us how we will provide parks and recreation facilities to the city at large, and it has somewhat to do with the facilities, obviously, but I think by that same account, we could create we can take so many of the other master plans that the city has and put them into infrastructure, infrastructure Measure P funds, and say, they ought to be funded by Measure P. Am I missing the point here? And if I am, then I'll be the last thing that I comment.
I'll refer to Ms. Garcia as to whether this is an overall parks master plan or is facility specific master plan, because I think that does make a difference.
Thank you.
Hello again. What we had proposed is an overall park master plan. We currently are doing a master plan for Isaiah Park, which is being funded through these same funding source. So.
All right, I leave you, my fellow board members, to figure out how you feel about it. You have my opinion, and I really thank you for allowing me to speak first, and thank you, staff, as well, for letting me speak first and responding to my comments. And I will see you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vandenborg. Okay, Mr. Jackson, you've had your hand up patiently.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree completely, wholeheartedly with what Jeff just said. When Measure P was put forward to the voters, it was half the money was to bail out the city's pension obligation, and the other half was to go to infrastructure and improvements. And the implication was it was going to deal with those unfunded millions and millions of dollars of unfunded projects. Now, I know Mr. McDougall will explain to us that the language of Measure P was written by his predecessor and our former city manager in such a liberal manner that almost anything the city does can be considered infrastructure. I'm really troubled that what I'm seeing, the Development Oversight Committee, which is internal staff, department heads and their representatives, is looking at the Measure P funds, Fund 534, is it, as a pool of money that they can draw from for pretty much anything. I mean, my view, infrastructure is street improvements, park improvements, and that like, not studies that are going to sit on the shelf for decades. Even the roofing of the police building, which is something that obviously needs to be done. I don't see that as an it's infrastructure improvements, but it's on a building which the voters said, we don't want a new police building. But Overham, our former city manager, thought better, and they built what we have, which cost $50 million or more, and it has inherent problems. I wish at our last meeting we looked a little closer, in a more systematic way at the projects that are being proposed for funding. I mentioned 2 or 3, you did, Madam Chair, and Jeff did also, but we didn't really have adequate discussion, I don't think. I mean, I was looking again on the city yard building. When we were created a little over 2.5 years ago, it was budgeted at $5.1 million. That has blossomed now over $11 million. And our director did mention, thanked us for bringing that up and says, inflation. And we all sort of nodded our heads. Inflation is a bad thing, and that's why costs have gone up. But inflation over that period has only gone up about 8.5%. Yet the cost of that building has gone up 100%. And we had no explanation of why the cost has gone up 100% in 2 years for that infrastructure. Tonight, there was the new item for funding, the flooring at the police and fire building. It says it's multi-years and it's going to pencil out at more than $1 million. In the preamble of the report that we received, said that there's 10,000 square feet of flooring, various types. Doing the math, that's more than $100 a square foot. I went online and checked what Home Depot is charging for flooring, carpet, and it runs between $1 and $5. Why are we paying $105 for flooring in the police building? So, those are things that I think we really should have and need to adequately go over these cases and get explanations. I'll cut to the chase. I'm not supporting what's coming before us tonight, and I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
Yes, I do. I understand Mr. Jackson's point because, yes, all these projects have accelerated. And after, like I said, after I've had that meeting at the city yard last week with the people in charge of taking care of some of these programs under the direction of Mr. Berkman, all I can say is, yep, construction costs have skyrocketed. I've double checked with a lot of the contractors I used to work with over the years, and they can't get things like wood anymore, shingles, different kinds of waterproofing products, flooring products. Everything's backlogged, or some of the companies that manufacture these products have been sold 4 and 5 times, which increase the cost. So yes, overall, the economy inflation is about 8%, but in construction, we're looking at 30-40%, depending on the product as well as the services, as well as the wait time to do anything. And then after I saw how the police department and fire department building was put together, just briefly, for example, that lower roof has about 20 plus drains. They all leak on where the people sleep at night. Give me a break. Plus, the walls are in bad shape. And yes, I understand people can be upset about all this extra money now. Why are we having these problems? It was because prior to us sitting here at this board, there have been many years of mismanagement in terms of funding infrastructure projects. The previous administration did not do a hell of a good job at it. I'm being nice now. They should have been all fired, literally. I remember when we first started, Mr. Jackson would ask this question. I would ask this question. How do you guys fund these? Where did you come up with the money to do this? How did you construct this? And we would not get a straight answer. We'd get put off and put off. And finally, we have a director that understands that, how to put this together. And so in general, no matter what number you're looking at for any project, you can forget about it. It's going to be up higher when they actually go to do the projects. Why? Times have changed. And previous administrators did not do a very good job in managing money and managing projects. For example, like the police department, just again, I can't believe I was told that the production manager, construction manager on the job was one of the police officers of the police department, one of the staff sergeants there. I'm not going to, make fun of anybody, but I mean, that was a multi-million-dollar project. You had just one of the officers in charge? No, I'm sorry. I'm really disappointed in what I've come across. It's just that some of the recent projects are better managed under Mr. Berkman, but I can understand where people are a little upset about how money's being spent right now. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Appreciate your input. Other thoughts, comments? Mr. Berkman?
Yes, Madam Chair, board members, thank you. And board member Brennan, thank you for the intro into what I'm going to say. One of the key elements that I mentioned last meeting, certainly inflation is not really in staff's control, and there are inflationary costs to every project, every year, every maintenance, staff costs. The key thing that I'm trying to change is our own personal project manager's accountability. We need to establish proper scope, budget, and schedule up front and put ourselves in the best situation to make sure we can hold to that. Time is the real enemy of projects when it comes to cost escalations. I know the CYSB, the yard building, that project's been around for a long time. The longer it goes, any project, the higher the costs are going to be. That's just inevitable. So my goal as your director is to make sure we establish schedules and complete them, not bite off more than we can chew internally. And there are multiple departments involved in project delivery, right? So we all need to do better, and we will do better to make sure this board doesn't see those types of escalations in the future. One of the key things that we did when I came on board, because I saw the yard estimate, and I said, well, is that real? So behind the scenes and part of the project, we brought a third party in who is construction management and estimator experts, took a look at it. And that's where you saw the additional escalations, because they said, this is the reality of the project. So we are going to get this done. It is, yes, at the 11 million mark, we think, and I hope it, we don't know what's happening in the future, but we're going to get this done, and we're going to do our best to get into that budget and not come back to you with more escalation. So I appreciate your thoughts, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Hahn, you unmuted.
Yes, I wanted to address the PD flooring. So the PD flooring, basically, it's the square foot cost. There's a lot of other costs associated with it. As far as we're not sure if it's going to be night work or not. So if there's going to be night work, the cost to do night work, it actually goes up. We need to also have inspection. So we have to hire an outside consultant to come and do inspection to make sure that the project is being put together and installed correctly. The first phase that we're actually doing this year will actually indicate also how much coverage we could get. So in the future phases, based on what we could do, it may dictate some of those costs may come down. The coordination effort, because we're working in the area where we actually have staff working. So we have to actually relocate the staff to an area that they could actually continue to operate and do work. So there's also remobilization or I guess relocation costs associated with it. We have to work with IT to actually, when they're being relocated, that they need to continue to do work. So we have to work with IT staff to move monitors, computer, printers. So there's a lot of other costs, not just with the rug itself. So that part of it, when we get a contractor on board, the contract that we're actually bringing a contractor on board is not your typical design bid build. It's a co-op. It's a contract that the city have access to that we actually work with purchasing. We will bring a contractor on board, and we will coordinate with the contractor based on the unit cost of what they could do the carpet for. But he will give us the cost associated with the relocation, other costs associated with the construction. So this is a new way of doing it for this particular install. So after this year, we're going to get a really good idea of what that cost is going to be. And the next phase 2 and 3 installation, we'll get a better idea. So that cost will be tightened down. And next fiscal year, when we're actually coming with the budget, the number will be, it'll be closer to a true number, I would say, for that. Right now, just an estimate based on what we believe the cost is going to be, based on not just the placement of the rugs and the flooring, but all the other associated costs with the project.
And Mr. Hoon, I would add, it's a good question to answer, because as a capital project of many years myself, one of the things that most people forget or don't understand is that every public works contract has to be paid by prevailing wage and all labor laws. So that automatically, increases the cost a lot compared to what private contractors can do in the construction industry. So, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification and information. Mr. Avazian, Ms. Rochelle, Ms. Coronado, do you have anything else you would like to add? Questions, thoughts? Okay, I have a few questions.
I saw Mr. Brennan's hand.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, did you use your hand up again? Please. It'll be much easier in person when I can actually see.
Yeah, okay. This is from Mr. Hood. Other than rugs, what kind of flooring is being installed? What kind of flooring is being torn out? What are you talking about flooring? Are we talking about trucks, where trucks go? Are we talking about where people come to the entrance? Are we talking about replacing flooring between floors? What are we talking about? Stairways? Specifically, what kind of products are being installed?
I don't know the specific products. Well,
that will determine what the costs are.
Sure. But the entire building needs reflooring. The carpets need to be replaced. I believe the linoleum finishes, even I think the gel area, they have to do some reflooring in that area also. So it's not just one floor, but it's the entire building that needs to be resurfaced as far as with
that's something that should be explained to us specifically. I mean, because different floors have different kind of flooring, different environments have different kind of flooring, and it costs differently. So that should be explained to us so that we can understand it. Because, like Mr. Jackson says, you can go to like a Costco or wherever and get independently buy something significant. But if you're talking about industrial flooring, it costs quite a bit more to install, whether it's prevailing wage or not. Therefore, you need to explain that to us so we better understand that each floor has a different environment and has a different flooring need. Such a lab or something like that, which I'm sure there are labs in that building.
Yes, Mr.
Madam Chair?
Berkman? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to remind the board that this is a high-level review of a capital program that is put forward by staff from all departments throughout the city based on their needs as they see them. In this case, police and fire staff and our own facility staff over the course of time, you know, you can see in the project sheet all the details of what's being proposed, a multi-year project. And there are various types of flooring that need to be removed and replaced. As we know, labor is usually the biggest cost in a tenant improvement, basically project like this. But for any project, we're looking for your high-level review and concurrence of the projects to go forward. And for the public's education, you know, it's completely transparent. When we go forward with these projects at this cost, they would go before council for contract, and there would be more details based on the bid documents when we put them together. So completely understand we need to provide the right amount of detail to make sure this board can make a decision, and based on our scores or in a multi-year project, they carry over. So you can advise council on the recommended program that staff is bringing before you. So we hear you loud and clear. We try and provide the necessary level of detail based on the information that we know from the requests. So for your consideration, we probably won't be able to answer all those levels of details because we're going with a high level start with enough detail to put forward a project sheet for everybody to understand what's going on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you both. Okay, I have a few questions, and then Mr. Avazian and Ms. Rochelle, Ms. Coronado, if you have any others that we can revisit. So last month, when we looked at the previous version of this on the top portion where it has the 534 projects, it said that the total available funding for 534 new projects was $7,382,000. And this month it says it's $7,172,000. And I'm wondering, where did that $210,000 go for that?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Chair Takahashi, that is for the PD flooring project that we added.
So it got moved from the new projects to the recurring or the continuing project section?
No, the PD flooring project actually was not on the list in February. And we actually included in this particular list here for this project for the March meeting.
Right. Okay. So just remind me again the practical application of the Measure P funds. So the number 7,172,000, that's the Measure P allocation, right? That's what we're getting, Miss Becker. Just to understand the difference between the ongoing projects funding 534 and the new projects 534.
Sure. From a financial standpoint, we don't differentiate between the two, but essentially, we have a fixed amount of revenue or a certain amount of revenue that we're projecting for the coming year. Against that, we have to take out our operating expenses, our MS&S, the things that we budget for annual maintenance within the fund, and anything left over is for capital projects. Obviously, those capital projects that have already begun or are underway that are in need of additional funding are prioritized. So that leaves a certain amount left for new capital projects, which is what we're sort of deciding on today, the above the line and below the line. So that's sort of how the process works. Now, it's not an exact science. We always have remaining funds from prior year, or revenues, of course, are just an estimate and they don't come dollar for dollar exactly what we project they're going to be. So in some years, we might not use 100% of our given revenue. In other years, we might use more than 100% of our given revenue because we have remaining funds over from prior years. So really you want to shoot to not use more than the revenue you get, because if you do that every year, obviously you're not going to have anything left in the fund. But there are years that we'll be able to use more and less, and it'll balance out over time, right? And you can see that fund balance will, we continue to monitor that year after year. And, for us from a finance perspective, it's sort of that year-end balance after the budget that matters to us as far as how much we have going forward.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess my thought is that how easily a project was added to the ongoing projects budget. And so last month we were considering 7,300,000 some odd thousand. And with the rearrangement, if that police and fire headquarters project hadn't been shifted, we would have been able to pop up either item 20 or 21 maybe into the capital improvement. So like if we had made the decision last month or the numbers had been different. So I'm just thinking like, where is our scope of what we have? Like what is our oversight where we have discretion and which things are going to be put into the budget that are coming from before that are not necessarily the purview of the Measure P oversight. So I'm trying to differentiate between the two where our scope of input is valuable and needed and necessary. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Now, if the board were to recommend that we add another project, certainly we could consider doing that, right? We're not limited by that financially. If we look at that very first page of the sheet that's in the packet, it's that infrastructure fund balance handout. I don't know if Mr. Hahn wants to put that on the screen or I could just speak to it. Essentially, we're starting the year with roughly $14 million in fund balance before we even receive our revenues for next year. And that is both unspent funds from prior years, revenues that came in excess of what we anticipated. We had that 1 year during COVID where we didn't really appropriate any capital projects because we didn't know what would happen financially to our revenue base. Now we're in a recovery mode where our revenues are exceeding our expectations, which is great news for the fund. But as you can see, so if you start with that $14 million fund balance, and then we're projecting 17.7, nearly 18 million in revenues. From that, we subtract those operating expenses, and that gives us our total projected available funds, that 27.3 million. We're proposing 13 million in infrastructure spending out of that fund, which still leaves us with $13 million remaining. So we're not depleting the fund, right? Whether we go up another 100 or down 100, at the end of the day, the fund is still financially solvent. So really though, what we're trying to do is it's twofold, recommending first, having our projects generally in line with the amount of revenues we receive every year. And second, not planning for more projects that our staff is able to complete in a given year. So that staff capacity is another important item, right? We have a fixed number of staff to be able to manage projects, and there's only so many that they could take on at one time. So as much as we would like to, do everything in 1 year, we realize that that's also not possible from a staffing and from a labor standpoint either. So it's finding that fine line between what we can accommodate financially and what we can accommodate staffing wise.
That was a crystal clear explanation of it. Thank you so much for that. Connected a number of dots that didn't quite have lines for me. So thank you for that. So that all said, let's say we were in a perfect world, we had infinite money, but our staffing is exactly the same. We couldn't just say, let's do those next 3 projects under the red line, because we still have to consider whether staff is even capable of doing all these projects too, right? So it's not just a financial consideration, right? It's also staffing and resources, human resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate Ms. Becker making that point. She jumped in before I did, because that's a big deal. The board's role in reviewing this, let's say you wanted to move a project above the line, swap it out. Well, a project above the line might be really consultant based. So it doesn't take as much time for staff to do that effort this year. But if you swap it out with a construction process or a heavy design staff effort, then that's not necessarily an apples to apples switch. So when we produce this sheet, we consider the dollars, of course, but we also have to consider staff who the folks who run these projects, both parks and public works, it's not the only thing they do. They've got multiple levels of responsibility. So it's up to me and Ms. Garcia to make sure we give them a workload that they're able to deliver. And that's to my point of, we don't want projects just sitting around because then they don't get done and the costs escalate and then nobody's happy.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. Okay, so to that point, my next question is about the item 21 that's underneath the red line, the shade structure for Johnny Carson Park. So Ms. Garcia, if that were switched out or if that were somehow added or we were pushed out above the line, would that be a significant drain on your resources to move that around? Or could you have some feedback on that particular project?
Yes, absolutely. Really good question. If that project were to move up as is with just your typical cantilever type of shade structure, I could absolutely get it done within this next fiscal year. As was suggested, and as we've talked, and I've connected with my team, we also absolutely think that Art and Public Places funds, which is a separate funding source, funds that the city receives from developers, so it's not taxpayer dollars. We could use those funds to complete this project. It just would not be completed within this next fiscal year. We can certainly start the planning process, but I have a different team who oversees the Art and Public Places program, and they don't have the capacity. So my intent and my thought after the last conversation was to move this project to have it fall under Art and Public Places. That way we can use those restricted dollars for this project. It's just not going to get done within this next fiscal year. So it would be a year out or a couple of years out.
Okay.
I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, so that is helpful to know that there's a different, even though it's still technically on this list that for us to look at, that you have other resources to work on that project from a different pool of funding. And it sounds to me, since it's Art and Public Places, that it'll be more elaborate than just like a typical shade, right? So it'd be much more interesting project and potentially a really like nice visually appealing project too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we're looking at, the budget somewhere in, at least $500,000. That's just what it would cost us. It would be could be a really fantastic project, a one of a kind. I think it could, definitely. I know Johnny Carson Park has so many awesome features, and it's really, really liked. And this would just be one other amenity that we would be offering the community while still providing some public art.
Great, thank you. And just a comment on this particular project that it also would be a return as well, because people would rent the space. So yes, there would be an investment in the infrastructure, but then like the golf course and that would be returned with I don't know how much would return, but there would be some return on the people the cost for renting it from the community, right? Okay. So Mr. Jackson, did you have a follow-up on that particular item, or because I have a couple more questions, but if that's on that particular item.
No, it was something else. It was going back to what Ms. Becker had shown on that chart. And I can hold and wait and ask that later, or I'll ask it now. Forgive me, I'm not a financial whiz. I'm happy I can keep my checkbook balanced every month. On that chart that you showed with the unrestricted funds, the very first item is general fund balance. And for this last fiscal year, it was $34 million. And after that, it disappears. What happened to the $34 million? It was spent. Is it not allocated again? I'm just, you have the big black lines going across, and I'm curious what that all means. Yes, there we are. Item 001.
Sure, certainly. I think that was because we don't tend to budget general fund balance for infrastructure projects. We put that in so we could get a total estimate of what our projected year-end balances are, but you can see the projected revenue and operating expenses are essentially blacked out because we haven't finalized our general fund budget for next year yet. We're still working on that. And of course, that'll come back to the council in a month or so, which is why until that's finalized, we don't know what our projected available funds are. So that presentation will be coming to the council very soon. But for right now, it's just an unknown, which is why it was sort of left blank. But you're right, we probably should have just not included it at all as opposed to including it there. But the reason that balance is higher than you would anticipate is because of the remaining ARPA funds that American Rescue Plan funding that we expect to receive before the end of the year.
And I would like to say that Ms. Becker did a wonderful presentation with the mid-year where she showed the 5-year forecast and really had some great statistics on the recovery and projections overall on the budget. And I would commend you to take a look at that if you have more interest.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Becker, for explaining that.
No problem. And that will be coming back to the City Council on April 26th. So stay tuned.
All right. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I had a question too about the golf course improvement site.
Madam Chair, I believe Vanessa has a question.
Oh, yes. Ms. Rochelle, thank you. It helps me if you put your little virtual hand up because it's okay. I don't
have my contact
can't
lenses.
see everybody.
I just cannot see it. So, I have this. I have questions about the master plan. So, if we were to put the master plan off, down in the future somewhere, does that hurt us financially? Will that cost us more? If we put that off, how does that affect us financially? I understand we can't just swap projects like that, but if we put that off, how does that affect us financially? Does it?
It may or may not hurt us financially. Really, it just depends. As the community's needs continue to change, our desire to move forward with a park master plan is, it is not going to be a plan that's going to sit on a shelf. I can tell you that. I really, my hope is that this master plan is going to help us identify the community's needs and help guide us in future years because it's going to, it's going to help us with our planning, with our requests. We will, do very extensive community engagement process. So, just as an example, I think of Olive Recreation Center or Isaiah Park Master Plan. We're, in the middle of it. We'll be wrapping that up by June. And so it's really important for us to know, does a community really, really want pickleball courts? And if so, then that's going to help us so that in next year, the year after that, we're not going to spend money to resurface tennis courts. Instead, we would be looking to turn those tennis courts into permanent pickleball courts. That's how I envision this master plan to help me and my department, as well as when I, present or Mr. Berkman presents our capital improvement program in future years, is to say, this is what we want to do and have that support, the community support, and have that plan outlined. Right now, yes, we have a lot of deferred maintenance, bathrooms that need to be replaced in playgrounds. But at the same time, our community needs are changing vastly. We're really reactive, building a dog park. And, we knew that that's a community need. But we, going through an extensive process just for that dog park and expending a lot of resources for one project. Whereas if we did a master plan, if that was, a master plan included in the master plan, and there may be a desire for more dog parks, right? We're able to do that collectively, holistically, look at all of our parks. What does the community need? And then now that we have that, ongoing funding source through Measure P, we're able to really put this plan make that into reality.
So this is a way. So actually, this helps us to look at the future rather than things happening all of a sudden, and then we're trying to scramble and do everything. Oh my goodness, how are we going to pay for it? I guess the question is, people sometimes they question a plan rather than something they can see. So we can see a bike path because it's there, but the planning behind it and the admin costs and all these things, that's not something that people see. But the plan, you actually have to have it organized and ready to go before it's too late, I would imagine.
Correct.
Okay.
I would, Madam Chair, if I can, I would simply add that a plan is also a prerequisite to updating our development impact fees. And to the extent that the Parks Master Plan identifies community-wide needs that are also attributable to future development, then we can adopt a new fee and we can charge new development outside of Measure P, outside of the general fund, for their fair share. At times, for certain projects, we can sometimes get them to build an improvement, but generally all projects pay a development impact fee, and those are built on top of an infrastructure plan. So, it's not an immediate thing, but you have to have the plan to justify the fee and do the math for the development impact fees.
Thank you. So for clarification, this can actually in the future increase our ability to fund infrastructure projects by having this plan and potentially higher development impact fees or more targeted ones. So that makes it easier in the future to fund. Great. Thank you for that expansion.
If I may, Chair Takahashi, add, one last thing. My department, my team, we're actively, aggressively looking for grants, and having an identified project master plan, being in a master plan after having gone through extensive community outreach is also extremely helpful in in our projects being a little bit more competitive. We're not a community, thankfully, that has a lot of low income. We don't meet certain criteria. So we have to really be smart about our grant applications and how can we be competitive when we're competing with other communities that don't have are park poor.
Thank you, Ms. Rochelle. Seeing no other hands, I have a question about, again, going back to the golf course. So the about $500,000 allocated to the golf course improvements, and we had talked about that last month, and you had you did some rearranging here, which I appreciate, and consolidating. But one concern I do have, Ms. Garcia, with the $500,000 is that in the project description, the one sheet that has all the scoring and stuff, it lists a number of things on there, but it's not broken down and how you got to that $500,000. And so what we had talked about last month was a couple of the specific things. I think one of them was the netting and a couple other things, and there was some discussion about how much of that was necessary for safety and for health purposes, and how much of that was for aesthetics and how much of that was for convenience and that kind of thing. And so I am a little bit hesitant to be 100% behind a $500,000 kind of not blank check, but kind of just a general allocation. I'm just wondering if maybe there's some specific direction that $500,000 will go, that we can know that it's going to really focus on safety and making sure that the infrastructure doesn't fail on us in the future, that kind of thing, and doesn't go to, I don't know, something that wouldn't be. There's not discretion as to where that money could just go without purpose. So just if you could expand on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Sure. So I did go back and have a meeting with our golf course operator, and I'm trying to find my notes here. So we did talk extensively about the use of the fund and what were our priorities, collective priorities. Netting and fencing are a huge safety concern. And we felt that, approximately $250,000 would go towards the fencing and netting. As that is, we want to ensure that not only golfers, but, community members that are driving or walking around the golf course, and that's not going to address all of the fencing and netting needs for the golf course, but that's going to be a significant improvements. I just don't have the exact locations right now. We also are going to use those funds to work on our trees. So that is also a safety concern. I don't have the breakdown of the trees. And lastly, it would be our bunkers, improving our bunkers. And that is, will save us on the maintenance end of the operation. So we're not, the cart paths are out. That's not going to be, we understand that, we saw the benefit, but that is not something that we're going to use these funds for. And we don't have any, immediate plans, or we're not going to spend the money on the restaurant itself. It's really addressing other safety items as our priority.
Okay, great. Because I think that part of the discussion around the golf course is this concern that it's only going to benefit a small percentage of the community, which is, I think, a fair concern. But if we're talking about netting and people hiking around the outside of it or driving, that actually is a concern for the entire community, because we don't want golf balls to be hit into our, cars and hurting us. That's I think a wider important thing to consider. The bunkers, saving money in the long run, that's always a positive in my opinion, especially looking at, long-term investments. The trees, of course, to maintain the green space in a healthy way. But I do want to just point out one of the comments of the speakers earlier, I don't know if they're still online, was about it being a space that is directed towards a small percentage of our community. And I'm wondering if there's a way, maybe not this year, because maybe it's too late to consider this, but as we look forward in the golf course, if there's a way to look at future ways to incorporate the golf course in more flexible space, maybe that it not only provides golfing space, but maybe it's, certain days of the week it's open to the public for musical events or, that kind of thing where when we do these improvements, we are definitely, looking at investment to get money back in ROI financially and to improve the golf course, but we're also opening it up for the entire community. So it's a benefit, a larger benefit and a larger investment in the whole community. I mean, maybe I've preached to the choir and you've already thought about this, but I just thought that might be another way to potentially look at it from a broader scale and make the argument, a bigger argument for the benefit to the whole community, and it's not just for a few folks who golf. But folks like me who don't golf could go there on Sunday evenings for a concert on the green or a picnic or something like that. I don't know what, but just kind of thinking about how we can make it a more flexible space.
And very excellent. If I may elaborate, I'm happy to provide the board, additional information in the future. Certainly, the golf course operation falls under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Board. But that's a really fair question. I can tell you just, we have, it is a golf course. It's primarily for golfers. But I'll tell you, the golf course also serves as the home golf course, so to speak, for our high school. So both Burbank and Burroughs High School golf teams, the DeBell is their home course, and we allow them to play there for free. So that is, I think, also a community benefit. We do have disc golf at the par 3, so it's not golf, traditional golf, it's disc golf. As Ms. Becker, I think, had mentioned previously, we not only do we have the restaurant, but we do have community events. We do breakfast with Santa, breakfast with the princesses and superheroes. We do a Halloween event. We're doing an egg hunt event, and during the summer we do have concerts out in the patio. I think it is called Concerts in the Green, if I'm not mistaken. But we do have concerts, and it sounds like we need to do a better job at promoting those events to the community. As I think of course it is a golf course, and I don't want to dismiss that, but we do a lot of things. There are a lot of events at that facility that benefit or open to the community as a whole. And we just need to do a better job to make sure the community knows that those events are taking place and knows that you can use that facility for other things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think that looking at the budget item, your mind goes to, oh, it's going to help golfers. But now that you've painted this picture, which each thing you listed, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. So then it really broadens this upgrade and these maintenance and these projects for a bigger scope. And so you don't think just the folks that are going there for golf on Sunday morning are going to benefit from this, but there's a lot of benefit for it. So thank you for painting that picture. Mr. Brennan, I see that your hand is up. Did you have a question, comment?
Actually, just a comment to make regarding the golf course. Not that I play golf there very rarely, but it's one of those great places to go hiking in the morning. For those of you who enjoy seeing coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, I can't say that I really saw a cougar up there, but you can see those kind of creatures, lots of deer, as well as the concerts that go on there during the summertime, as well as there is a wild animal, or what do you call it, like it's kind of a museum up there just north of the golf course. And so there's all these hiking trails around there. So yeah, you probably should advertise all the other benefits. Golf course is just one of many attractions up there. And you'd be surprised how many people actually hike through the golf course, either before it opens or while it's open. And other people up there doing Frisbee throws during the day, because they don't get that many golfers during the day. So it gets used. The whole area gets used. And some great views, and it's pretty, like I said, go up there and see wildlife, not just play golf.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
So maybe advertising is a good idea.
Yeah. Now I want to go. I've been to the restaurant, but I've never been in, around the golf course. So kind of now I want to go.
Golf course is great, as well as going up another mile beyond the golf course. Hiking trails. Really good hiking trails, as well as the what do you call it? Not necessarily the museum, but like
the Wildwood Canyon, the Soap Canyon.
Yeah, the Wildwood Canyon park thing.
All right, so I had just a couple more questions, and then that's it for me. But I do want to revisit the aircraft again. I know a couple folks mentioned it during the call, and I just wanted to make sure that we covered that. There's a couple hanging things for me. One of them was, just want to confirm that the 15K is to assess the situation with it of what to do next. So if whatever the results of that investment is next year, we're going to have some cost for either updating it or removing it or something. So this is like kind of phase one, and it'll move next year. It'll move into probably the lower section, which is an ongoing project, right? Am I understanding that this is like kind of phase one of then to see what the next steps are for the aircraft in front of Olive Park?
Yes, that the 15,000 is a more accurate cost estimate to do a structural analysis or look at evaluate the structural integrity of that jet. It is we do have an agreement with the Air Force. And that plane was installed in the mid 80s. And so it's one of our requirements, a legal requirement for us to maintain, for us to do the upkeep and maintenance of that plane. So obviously, we want to make sure that it's safe. And if it needs any, repairs, we'll certainly get that done. I will also mention that my team has been trying to work with I believe it's a group of retired Lockheed Martin, an organization, to see if there would be any interest or desire for sponsorship or co-sponsorship to assist with, if it just needs to be painted or if it needs to be repaired. We know that plane obviously has that history with Lockheed Martin, so we're looking to see how else. We're trying to be as creative as possible in terms of funding, trying to find those creative funding sources. So, but certainly, we believe that $15,000 is a small investment in ensuring the safety of that plane.
Right. And so if I understand you correctly, we are in a contract how long does that obligation last? Is it indefinite that we have that as part of our park system indefinitely, or is there some sort of sunset on it, or is this did they get us into a contract 20 years ago that our future grandchildren are going to be responsible for forever? So kind of thing.
Yeah, I will mention, and I haven't looked at the contract most recently. I believe the contract is a loan, right? So it's not a gift. I don't know if it's gift or a loan. The contract is updated. I think, I know it's due to be renewed this year. And so I think there is a clause or an ability that if the city no longer wishes to keep this jet, we would have to work through the Air Force to, I don't know where to go, return it. But I will tell you that we do have, Lockheed is a part of our city's history, and that plane was installed. I can tell you, I know that, we have some council members that are, very proud of that plane. And I say that because, I'll get the call of hey, just inquiring about, the upkeep of that. So
I have a feeling this is one of those things where if you try to get rid of it, there'd be a big outcry, and trying to fund it to repair it's going to be big. It's just one of those things where you have to accept that there's going to be some opinions about it. But it sounds like this $15K, from what I can see, it's a reduced from last month, the amount. And it's part of our responsibility as a city to take care of it. And so we need to assess, sounds like the quality of it. Okay. So those are all the questions I have. I have some specific questions about some of the projects that are ongoing, but I'm just going to email specifically about them. And I'm really curious about the downtown. The bridge repairs, item 17, for example. Is that the railings on the Olive Bridge, just stuff like that. So I think that we're going on a little late tonight, so I'm not going to get into the details of that. But I want to encourage folks who may still be hanging on and watching this meeting tonight, that if there's something that you too have a question about these specific items, to reach out and to ask about them. And of course, the other board members tonight, if you're have questions too. Any other questions or thoughts about the budget that's proposed? Yes, Mr. Avazian.
I just have a simple question regarding the golf course. What is the possibility or consequences of separating the revenues and spending for the golf course from the general fund?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I missed part of the middle of it.
What I understood was the revenues from golf course goes to general funds, and upkeeping of the golf course again goes out of the general fund. Is this possible to just create a separate account that way you track the revenues and spending, and that way after spending income from the golf course will be spent and on the golf course itself, and will be tracked more transparently, I would say.
That is always an option. We did previously have a fund where we tracked the expenses and revenues of the golf course. Because of the size of the operation, it's not really necessarily always a good idea for it to have an individual fund. For example, we have other enterprise funds that are much larger. For example, the city's water utility or electric utility. Golf has fluctuated over the years. We do know that it ran into some financial difficulties a few years ago. And Mr. McDougall, please cut me off if I'm going too far into the weeds, or because I know we're supposed to focus here on infrastructure and not operations. But the problem with a golf course having its own fund is that then you have to depreciate the assets within that fund, and it becomes an additional burden that you have to fund. So is the golf course covering its operations, its operational expenses with operational revenues? Yes. Can the golf fund or can the golf course necessarily afford to sustain all of its infrastructure needs over time? No, not necessarily. And that is the situation that we got in with the golf course, right? It needs those investments. It went a number of years without doing any upgrades, without any infrastructure maintenance, because it couldn't sustain those items. Now, we have an operator that may put the golf course in a position where in the future it could. And the city council could elect to spend general fund dollars on the golf course or contribute more general fund dollars towards infrastructure for the golf course. That's always an option that they could choose to do. But right now it's part of the general fund, but because it runs by an outside operator, we do a quarterly financial report so that we can monitor revenues and expenses within the fund and make sure that it's that the operator is doing its job and that the city is doing its job in maintaining the golf course.
You could question Mr. Ozian.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson, do you have your hand up? No? Okay. I think we're at a point where we covered all of our questions. Does anybody have, I think at this point we were asking questions, but nobody made a suggestion to move anything around. So I just want to make sure that we don't have any requests or suggestions to move anything up or down before we move on. Okay. No? Okay. So if the board feels like we have thoroughly asked all of our questions, that we feel comfortable moving forward, I believe the next step, Mr. Berkman, is to take a vote. Is that correct? On making a recommendation to present this as presented to council?
That's correct, Madam Chair. I'll entertain a motion and a second and a vote, and we will move on to this program, the council.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to move this forward and present it
Make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Brennan?
I'll make a motion to move it forward.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Avazian? Okay, we have a first motion and a second, so let's take the vote.
Armin Avazian?
Yes.
Walter Brennan Jr.?
Yes.
Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Greg Jackson?
No.
Vanessa Rochelle? Was that a yes? Yes, that was a yes from Vanessa. Tamala Takahashi?
Yes.
And Jeff Vanderboort abstaining.
Thank you all for this great conversation. Thank you to staff for being here and sitting through this whole thing and answering all of our questions and being patient with us. And for putting together all of this information for us. I just want to say that it is, compared to last year, while there's still, I think, are some areas that we can learn from this process. Compared to last year, this has been a much more organized and thorough look at our capital improvement program. So thank you for putting all this information together. And I just appreciate that, all of you, and the work you put in, because I think some of that work, I know some of that work is unrecognized because it's done behind the scenes and in late nights and whatnot. And so I just wanted to make sure we take that space today to recognize the efforts that you all put into making this possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I guess we have to go on to the next items on the agenda. I was like, oh, we're done. No, we're not done exactly. So next up is future agenda items, I would think, isn't it?
Correct. Item
Yes,
H,
future agenda items. Does anyone have any introduction of additional agenda items before we? Yes, Mr. Berkman.
I did. Madam Chair and board members, given that we are glad to say, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, going live in May, I would like to add an agenda item to the April meeting to consider the location of our in-person meetings. I'll put that on there, please.
Wonderful. Thank you. And well, before we move on to that part, any other additional agenda items?
No.
No? Okay. So moving on to the future agenda items, can we review for a moment, please, Mr. Berkman, our April joint meeting and how that's going to go?
Sure. The joint meeting with the Transportation Commission is set for the 28th. They're going to attend our meeting here next month. And we'll be reviewing responsibilities related to the traffic programs in our city.
Okay.
And in May, we'll be bringing forward through Mr. Hahn, the third quarter capital improvement program report for this fiscal year, Mr. Hoon. That's correction 21-22 as opposed to 22-23. That is it.
You said that's probably for May?
It's scheduled for May, yes.
Okay. Is that going to also include the updates of completed projects where you provide us with pictures and
Correct.
That? Wonderful. Great.
Exactly.
I was wondering when that was going to come up next. Okay, great.
It's our current work report to the board.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you all for your conversation and input. And we will adjourn at 9 o'clock. It's earlier than we did last month, half an hour earlier.
Right.
So thank you all for being here and have a good rest of your evening. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Good night, everyone.